everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And I wasn't sure whether to pop on the live machine or not tonight. And I decided, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm very excited to break down every single element of Vikings, Bears, and dive deep into everything. Got a ton of guests coming up this week. But I thought, let me allow the news football gods to tell me whether I should be here tonight or not. I thought if there's any Vikings news, then we'll stay on top of it and we'll jump on. And if there's not, then we'll just enjoy the rest of the weekend. And well, lo and behold, there was some news today from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler. He reported earlier today that the Vikings are, quote, optimistic about wide receiver Jalen Naylor with a hand injury playing week 1 versus the Chicago Bears, barring a setback, per sources have told Fowler that. And he says Minnesota envisions a key role for Naylor, especially with Jordan Addison out via suspension. So there is our news update from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler that the Vikings are optimistic about Jalen Naylor. And I'm this far out, I'm sure that it would be difficult for Fowler to say for sure that Naylor is going to be in against Chicago, but that sounds like probably will practice and at least be out there this week with Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. And there's a few different things that came to my mind right away when I saw this news. Number one is that the receiver starting on Monday night with JJ McCarthy, who has caught the most passes from JJ McCarthy, and it's actually not even close in practice, of the 3 starting wide receivers, is actually Jalen Naylor. So he's thrown with Justin Jefferson, he's thrown with Adam Thielen, but he only had a couple of practices in the beginning of training camp with Jefferson, and he's never had a practice until this week with Adam Thielen. And when they acquired Jalen Naylor, or when they acquired Adam Thielen, my thought was, well, if Naylor is out, then that's a lot of pressure on Adam Thielen to come in here within 2 weeks and then, hey, buddy, can you play like 60 or 70 snaps as wide receiver 2 across from Justin Jefferson? And then, well, who's going to pop up into the wide receiver 3 role? Like, is that Ty Felton? Are they just going to play 2 tight ends for the entire game? Like, how's this going to work? Are they going to elevate Lucky Jackson because he was the most knowledgeable? But if Jalen Naylor is back, there is an element of, well, this is still the 3 wide receivers essentially that you would have hoped for. Someone who was from the outside that they acquired in Adam Thielen and is about as good as you can do at the very last minute, that has familiarity with KOC and with JJ McCarthy. Justin Jefferson, we're going to assume that he is back to full practices at 100% and he's ready to be Justin Jefferson again, despite missing a lot of that camp. But Naylor is the guy that actually has chemistry with McCarthy throughout training camp. Now, I didn't think it was the greatest camp that I've ever seen from Naylor, but he did have to kind of mix and match with the positions that he was in because Jefferson was out. And then, they were preparing for when is Addison going to be out and so forth. But they're on the same page to some extent, having worked together before. And with Naylor, my question is, how good does Jalen Naylor have to be now? So you've got Adam Thielen and you have Jordan Addison coming back after 3 games. And is Jalen Naylor going to be still a major part of this mix once Jordan Addison comes back? So here is the FanDuel question of the day on Jalen Naylor. Then I want to get more into just him this season and his outlook and so forth. But the FanDuel question of the day ties into this, which is you could play a weekly special on FanDuel, including Justin Jefferson catching a 10-yard pass in every quarter. Now that we know that Naylor is likely to be back, what percentage of the targets should go to Jefferson against Chicago? Or would you like to see the ball get distributed? Would you like to see Jefferson still get pumped the football a ton, knowing that Naylor is coming off of an injury and that Adam Thielen is just ramping up as a Minnesota Viking? I do think that it takes a lot of pressure off of Adam Thielen if they have Jalen Naylor back, because then Naylor can fit back into that number 2 type of wide receiver role. Thielen can play more of the slot role, which he's been doing over the last couple of years with the Carolina Panthers. And there you go. You have at least a good bevy of weapons aside from Justin Jefferson. And it doesn't have to be fully the Justin Jefferson show, which my FanDuel question of the day answer would be about 30% of the targets should go to Jefferson. And I think they have enough weapons with Hockenson and now Naylor back and Thielen in the mix for JJ McCarthy to go where things take him against these Chicago Bears. So let's just circle back to Jalen Naylor in general, though, because his entire sort of journey as the remaining 2022 draft pick, other than Ty Chandler that's still here, but the only 2022 draft pick that actually plays, Jalen Naylor. He is carrying an entire draft class there on his shoulders. When he gets to Minnesota, he immediately flashed and has had the attention of Kevin O'Connell since then. And last year, I was reviewing what he did last year, and it's kind of an interesting season because he starts out with playing against the New York Giants. Addison gets banged up in that game, and Naylor catches a 20-yard touchdown. The next 2 weeks, which have been talked about a lot by Kevin O'Connell, of, hey, we were able to survive, against San Francisco, against Houston when Jordan Addison was out. And Naylor in those games caught 6 passes on 8 targets for 2 touchdowns and a total of 85 yards. And my feeling is that if Naylor can do something similar to that, if he can have 6 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown or 2 in the first 3 games of the season, that's going to be enough because they have so many other players who get a lot of targets. Jefferson and Hockenson, I think, will be 1 and 2 on this football team at the end of the day. And now the fact that you can mix in Adam Thielen, Aaron Jones is going to get the ball a lot, I think. And the article is coming out tomorrow that I've been mentioning for a while about Josh Oliver. And I think he's going to be thrown in the mix quite a bit as well, because even though you have 3 wide receivers and this system is rooted in 3 wide receivers, Oliver, they gave him a big extension. They gave him a big contract. Like, they're going to play him. He's going to be out there at times. And I wouldn't be surprised if he played about half of the snaps in this game, because I don't think you want Adam Thielen to have to walk right in and have to play 60 or 70 snaps. I think you'd much rather have him play 30 snaps as wide receiver 3, and you can use 2 guys who have been in this system for the entire time, Jalen Naylor and Justin Jefferson, and then the rest of the group, including Josh Oliver. But, Naylor last year, after those couple of games where it seemed like he kind of put his name on the map, the rest of the season only had 2 games that you'd really want to write home about. That was against Detroit in week 7, where he had 4 catches for 76 yards. And then late in the season against Green Bay, probably his best game of the year, where he had 5 receptions for 81 yards, 16 yards a catch, and a touchdown, finished with 28 receptions and 6 touchdowns. And I think that this is a big year for Jalen Naylor for his career in general, because he is going to be a free agent after this season. And we've reached a point here, going into September 1st, going into the few days away from the season, the week of the season. And I've seen, I don't know how many camps now. What is this? 4 camps of Jalen Naylor. I've seen, I don't know how many games now, and I still don't fully feel comfortable saying exactly what he is, because he's kind of been as much of a concept as he has been a player for this team. I mean, when you go through his season, this was a guy who got on the plane and flew all the way to London to play against the Jets last year to get 0 targets against the Jets. He had 1 against the Colts. He had 2 against Tennessee. One of them was a drop that should have been a touchdown. And the drops are certainly an issue at times. He had 4 last year, which is 12% of his targets. Now, they don't make those relative to your depth of target. Clearly, if the ball is traveling farther, it's harder to catch it than it is if you're getting a dink and dunk type of thing. But dropping almost 13% of your passes is not good for any wide receiver. You think about that number of 4 drops. Adam Thielen had that last year and had 60 some, or no, he had that 2 years ago when he had 100 and something targets and 100 catches. That was the same number of drops. Like, that's just way too much for Naylor. And what I wonder about him is this year when he got to OTAs and minicamp, everybody was talking about, hey, this guy looks bigger, this guy looks stronger. And it seems that he had gone into the offseason probably realizing there's a big contract out there for you, at least a sizable contract out there for you if you can prove that you are more than just this occasional deep threat who can catch 20 passes. That the numbers for guys like that are still decent, like a Tutu Atwell or a Josh Palmer, that very clear number 3 wide receiver is still getting $10 million. That's the reason you draft Ty Felton, is because you're not figuring on re-signing someone like Naylor. But if he has a bigger season than that and becomes a favorite target of JJ McCarthy, unlike last year of Sam Darnold, then he could make even more millions. Or it could be just like a KJ Osborne case where at the end of the season, we're looking back and going, remember when we were talking about Naylor and his potential breakout season and it just never happened? And that's the other thing I wonder about for these first 3 games is, will Jalen Nailor prove that he still belongs in the Vikings lineup? We have a really good idea of what Adam Thielen is going to bring to the table. He is going to be reliable. He's going to be open underneath. They'll probably sneak a couple of throws in the intermediate or downfield areas to Adam Thielen. He's going to catch everything. He's going to be in the right spots. Like, we know exactly what that looks like with Adam Thielen. But with Naylor, I still don't know exactly what that looks like. Does it look like the occasional, oh my gosh, they forgot about Jalen Naylor and he's wide open and caught a touchdown, and that's pretty much it? Because that's kind of how it felt like last year. Now, he did have a great catch against San Francisco. Darnold kind of threw it behind him. They needed a dagger drive, and he reached back, and he made a great play. And at that point, I was thinking, well, maybe they've got another one. I mean, Keenan McCardle has done such a good job with developing these wide receivers. Maybe they've got another one. And then he just sort of disappeared into the background as the season went along, and he was running clear out routes time and time and time again. But they need more than just clear out routes from Jalen Naylor. They need, over these first 3 games, serious wide receiver play. And he needs serious wide receiver play, because otherwise, when Jordan Addison comes back, it will be Adam Thielen, and Jalen Naylor will be watching from the sideline or just mixing in from time to time the same way it was in 2022. It'll kind of be just right back to that, where we didn't see a whole lot of Naylor in his first year, and then his second year he ends up getting banged up, and last year he's in from time to time. But they are now leaning on Jalen Naylor going into this first game against the Chicago Bears. So I am curious about your answers to that FanDuel question of the day of, well, what percentage do you want to see of the targets go toward Justin Jefferson in this first game? But what are your thoughts on all of that? Your thoughts on, okay, Jalen Naylor coming back is clearly enormous news for the Minnesota Vikings, because otherwise they would have had to run a lot of 2 tight ends, or a rookie out there, or an undrafted free agent out there, or whoever. Like, I'm not sure exactly what their answer would have been for wide receiver 3 if Jalen Naylor wasn't there. I'm assuming it would have been maybe 20 plays of Ty Felton and a lot of plays of Josh Oliver. And they also can't really mix big personnel without CJ Ham for the first couple of weeks of the season either. So they would be pretty limited without him. But where should we set the bar for Naylor? Is he just a guy? Is there more there? He didn't have a camp that made me think, oh my gosh, this guy is coming, but that doesn't always predict exactly how it's going to go. And certainly McCarthy found him a number of times. I do have some concerns about the hands, because there were more than a few drops in practice that made me go, oh, that's a ball you got to catch, man. And what's the long term for Jalen Naylor? I mean, is he a guy that throughout the rest of the season remains in the mix, gives them 4 wide receivers to work with, extra dynamic element where now if it's Thielen, if it's Naylor, you can give Justin Jefferson not too much of a rest, but an occasional rest. You can give Jordan Addison an occasional rest. Maybe you're working matchups with, it's not going well for Addison against this guy, so try Naylor. Or is it just, all right, well, thanks for the first 3 games. Now you're going to go over there and watch Adam Thielen play. So what are the expectations for Jalen Naylor now that it looks like he is back in, according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler? And let me get to one other thing real quick, because I don't have a lot to say about it. Tom Pelissero reported that Adam Thielen agreed to a revised contract, reducing his salary by $2 million and removing $4 million in incentives. It wasn't about the money, Pelissero tweeted. Thielen wanted to come home and volunteered to help the team's salary cap to make it happen. So that's kind of interesting way of framing that, because I asked somebody not connected with Adam Thielen or the Vikings, just an outside person that I know is very knowledgeable about the salary cap. And I just said, did they need to do this? Like, am I missing something on overthecap.com? Did they need to make cap space here? And the answer was that no, not really, but it's nice if you can. And I think that when they made the deal, that there were not two parties involved, there were three parties involved. And I think that Dan Morgan in an interview said the word like adamant about coming back or something like that. Like, Thielen really wanted to be a Minnesota Viking this season right now. And I mean, that's, good for him to be back here in Minnesota, but that may have been part of the concession for Thielen from the Vikings side of, okay, like if you're going to come back, we can't pay you that much money. Between him, the team, and his representative may have been like, we need to carry over cap space for next year. And also the cash spending has been enormous from this ownership. And they also may have said, that's a lot to spend for Adam Thielen right now. Can we work something out to reduce the amount that we have to throw his way? And carrying over the cap space into next year is a big deal for the Vikings, and every dollar counts there, because if you go to overthecap.com, if you look at next year's salary cap situation, it's not good for the Vikings. Stuff's going to have to happen there. More cash is going to have to get thrown down to restructure deals and things like that. So every dollar is going to be helpful when it comes to making that happen. But I think it also does speak to what Tom Pelissero said, just how badly Adam Thielen wanted to come back to Minnesota, and he's made his dollars over his career. And you can't replace being back here at home with a team that has extremely high expectations. I think it also speaks to, like, you and I have not caught passes from JJ McCarthy, but Adam Thielen has. You and I, if we caught passes from JJ McCarthy, wouldn't know the difference between him and, I don't know. I don't want to say Sam Howell. We could probably tell the difference. Carson Wentz. But Adam Thielen can, and Adam Thielen's been around a lot of quarterbacks. So I think it says a lot about just what he thought of what was happening here and how much he wanted to be back, that he was willing to, deal with that. But, I think, I think that, that's pretty much really all that it says. I mean, it's not like they made a huge change to this contract, but notice a notable small item there of just housekeeping for the Vikings, for all of us who keep a really close eye on the salary cap every second and every dollar that goes in and out over there on overthecap.com. So, all right. Let me get your thoughts here on Jalen Naylor. Expectations for him, what you think that he should do over these first three games, what it means long-term, takes on Jalen Naylor, and how much they need him to do this. And how about this? Here's a good way to frame it. It's like, what's your confidence in him right now? Like, give me if you want to give me like a 1 out of 10, what's your confidence that Naylor can take care of business over these first 3 weeks? He doesn't have to be Jordan Addison, but good enough. Confidence in Jalen Naylor right now. What is it? And I'll answer, of course, any other questions that you have. Is it Lucky Jackson time finally? I don't think it's going to be Lucky Jackson time. Probably, unless there's injuries, it won't be. If Jalen Naylor were to get hurt, I would be very curious to see, would they move up Lucky Jackson from the practice squad to play, or are they confident enough in Ty Felton? Because throughout training camp, it certainly looks like Lucky Jackson was ahead of Ty Felton on the depth chart, but it's not a perfect way to do it. It's not a perfect way of, I mean, think about this. Lucky took those first team reps all offseason, and then he gets cut on cutdown day. And then he ends up back on the practice squad, whereas Ty Felton makes the team as he would as a third round pick, but he makes the team and he took, 5 first team reps all summer long. They might look at Felton as someone that they could slot in to a particular role, whereas elevating a Lucky Jackson is probably not going to be much of a game changer for you. I don't know, but it's an interesting question of if somebody gets hurt, then how exactly is that going to work out? Scotty says thoughts on the Packers now being the favorite to win the North. Overreaction, I think. I mean, look, they're good with Micah Parsons, and there's no downplaying how good that is for them. They just got a very legitimate defensive player of the year candidate. But I think that making them the favorite over the Lions and the Vikings is pushing it a little too far off of one move. That does elevate a defense that was very good last year. I would also suggest you go back and look at the opposing quarterback schedule they had last year. Spencer Rattler being shut out by the Packers certainly helped them a little bit with some of their statistics, and so did the AFC South. But I mean, I here's what I think with now the North. I would have had it clearly Vikings and Lions, and then a step down Packers. Now I have all three as being equal, and then the Bears chasing. I would have had all three being equal. Vegas Patriots says Panthers re-sign Hunter Renfrow after placing Jalen Coker on IR. Good timing for the Vikings. Yeah, that was unfortunate. I mean, all fantasy players who play in deep leagues were aware of Coker being a guy that was going to go into the slot for the Carolina Panthers, and him getting hurt is unfortunate timing for them. But you're right. If that had happened 1 day earlier, or 2 days earlier, then things are very different. Very different. Then you're talking about the Panthers not being able to trade Adam Thielen. So the timing did end up fortuitous for the Vikings. I don't think, people like to try to keep score on who won what trade or whatever. We're going to find that out in the long run, I guess. But it was a bad break for Carolina, and having the fact that Thielen was already here, you can't take it back. But they liked Renfrow the entire time. Here, the way that it sounded to me was that Thielen had already kind of been like, we're going to move on from him throughout camp. And it was just where, because, you listen to my interview with Mike Kay the other day, and he was talking about how like the other receivers were just getting a lot more attention, and that the team had been very high on Hunter Renfrow. So I think they wanted that outcome. And maybe the reason they cut Renfrow was just the timing, that they couldn't get the trade finished. So they had to cut him with plans of bringing him back. That's at least how it reads, because Renfrow, at least according to their reporters, had a very good camp. So maybe they would have done it anyway if the timing was a little bit different. Aaron says Jets, Naylor, Thielen for week 1 is the best news. Predicted score, I'm going with 27-13. Have you got your score yet? I don't. Usually try to do that in the last show of the week, which is going to be Saturday with Andrew Kramer from the Star Tribune. We are bringing back our hardcore previews, which will normally be on Friday night. But, of course, with this week, it's going to be Saturday night. But I have not thought about score yet. I did notice you're right in the ballpark of the FanDuel over-under, which I think is 43.5. A 27-13. I would probably go under on that, because a 27-13 score sounds very reasonable to me. Let's see. Fanny, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I think the Vikings did a great job keeping this under wraps until the Thielen trade. You mean with Jalen Naylor's health? Well, they may not have known where Jalen Naylor's health was, at least the way that Kevin O'Connell talked about it. I would have thought of it the other way. I would have thought about if Jalen Naylor and his hand injury was totally fine, that would have helped them with the Thielen trade. So they would have wanted that out there. I would have thought that they would have wanted him out there. In fact, the fact that they did not say definitively that he was okay kind of made me wonder, like, is he going to be? And even the language there is a little couched with optimistic that he can play. It's a deadlock that he's absolutely going to play. which also makes me think that they didn't have that sense until recently. And then that's when they told Jeremy Fowler what's going on. And then we'll see when we actually get out there for practice. George says, only wide receiver I'm worried about is, I assume you mean Jefferson. Hope that KOC eases him back in with running emphasis on intermediate passing. We can also give JJ time to adjust to the NFL. Okay, if you're using JJ for both, and I've made this mistake too, because then it's confusing. So letting Jefferson's hamstring get back to shape in order to not be pushing the gas pedal to all the way down and letting JJ McCarthy ease into it. I don't know if you could do that, but what they did with Justin Jefferson is they played it as safe as they possibly could for week 1. I am expecting the full Justin Jefferson. I'm not expecting, hey, let's try to make sure that his hamstring doesn't get tweaked on certain types of routes or something like that. I am expecting Justin Jefferson, full speed, 100%. I mean, what was supposed to be a mild hamstring injury turned into a lot of time missed. For me, that's all right. If you're going to take that much time to ramp up out of an abundance of caution, then by the time you get to the season, you better be ready to go. Jay says, would Adam still be number 2 if Naylor is ready? So that is the big question right there, Jay. That is the big question for me is how does this sort itself out? And look, there is number 1 and there's everybody else with how this offense works. It's Justin Jefferson is the first look on a lot of plays for the Minnesota Vikings. And then the second look is whomever is around. Okay, it's Hockenson underneath because they've tripled Jefferson. Or, Jefferson doesn't get off the line of scrimmage against somebody. They get physical with him and they're rotating a safety over. So the backside of the play is going to have a one-on-one. Let me go over there. Where the read takes you is the number 2 wide receiver. But in sort of fantasy-ish terms with who's getting the most targets, ranking it target-wise, it is a great question. Will Adam Thielen immediately be the guy that ends up getting more targets than Naylor, despite how long Naylor's been here? I would think that the answer is yes, that Adam Thielen would get more targets, but it's not because I think Naylor can't do his job. It's just that the jobs are going to be different in an ideal world. In an ideal offensive situation, Justin Jefferson does absolutely everything. And where I think they could be even a little better, when we mentioned the FanDuel question of the day and the percentage of targets you'd like to see against Chicago go to Justin Jefferson, I think that they can get him involved earlier than they did sometimes last year, where he still ended up with great numbers. But sometimes it felt like, hey, was Jefferson a primary target in that quarter? And that was the bet there was, can he catch a 10 or more yard pass in every quarter? He certainly can, because he's not defendable by anybody, any team, any defense. No one has consistently shut down Justin Jefferson. So you should be able to do that. But I think that they could get him a bucket a little bit better, get him involved earlier a little bit better than they've done at times in the past with KOC. But circling back to the Naylor and Thielen thing, I think Thielen gets more targets because he is, at this point in his career, more of a underneath, sense where the zones are. This is what the Panthers reporter the other day talked a lot about, where it's running slants, running hooks, running curls, all that sort of stuff. Hooks and curls might be the same thing. And hitches, all those little comeback routes where maybe when you take off from the line of scrimmage, you're not exactly sure what the defense is playing. You settle into a zone. Jefferson's not there. Lean on Adam Thielen. Lean on TJ Hockenson. Whereas Jalen Nailor, that's a deep shot most of the time. And I think for me, that's where I really want to see Jalen Nailor become a different version of himself. Last year, it was kind of all or nothing. There were a handful of underneath throws to him. I can look up the average depth of target for Naylor. Overall, he averaged almost 15 yards a reception. Average depth of target was 12 and a half. So I guess it wasn't all just deep bombs, but that's what they want to do. They want to go downfield to Jalen Naylor. Can he be in this role with Addison out, can he be more of a complete wide receiver? That's what you want to see for him. Chris says fully expecting a competition between Naylor and Thielen once Addison comes back. Is it this is a good question. Is it a competition or is it a rotation? Because if you have a competition, that would sort of insinuate that it's either going to be Naylor or Thielen, and that's just it for the rest of the season. So Addison comes back, and hey, Thielen, you won. You're in. You're playing 50%, 60% of the snaps, and then Naylor, like you watch from the sideline. Or is it going to be for this look, Naylor's in, for that look, Thielen's in? Hey, Jefferson just ran 14 go routes in a row. Let's get a play in there for Naylor playing the role of Jefferson and Thielen on the field. In the best case scenario for the Vikings, what this becomes is the single most dynamic group of weapons in the NFL, where you can shapeshift and you can kind of be anything you want to be. Last year, I felt like they were not super dynamic. They were kind of one-trick pony-ish, which was downfield. It was Naylor's a deep receiver. It was Addison catching deep balls. I mean, think about that Chicago game where it's like throwing it up for grabs for Addison, ripping a pass over the middle where he's going on a deep crosser and that kind of thing. Like, it was a lot of downfield stuff to Jordan Addison. It was a lot of intermediate and downfield stuff to Justin Jefferson. And Hawkinson was watching the ball fly over his head time and time again. But when you think about having all three levels of receivers who specialize in certain areas, so Aaron Jones, who can run out of the wide receiver spot if he wants to, he's that good at it, but you don't typically want him to be a receiver. He's more of the underneath guy. So your check down underneath option is one of the better receiving backs of the last 10 years, Aaron Jones. The underneath area is Hawkinson and Thielen, two guys who have been Pro Bowl caliber players a lot on underneath type stuff. And then you have your over the top guys, and Jefferson can do anything he wants, but you're trying to create explosive plays with Jefferson. That's the best case scenario, is that you would have Naylor mixed in there as another guy who can go deep down the field, and then the underneath options, and then sort of the screen option. If they have that, all those different areas, I mean, JJ McCarthy, anything you want to do, man, on a given play that you could give it to somebody who could get open. If Naylor struggles out of the gate and doesn't have a very good first couple games, then it feels a lot more like, how could you call it? Like a lot more uneven, a lot more reliant on Jefferson, reliant on Addison and Hawkinson underneath. And then you don't really have another option. That's kind of how I would feel about it. And it would still be excellent, of course, but you're leaning a lot on a 35-year-old wide receiver who I think should have 30 or 40 catches, is what you want in an ideal world. And then it's 20 or 30 to Jalen Nailor, and then, 90 to Jefferson, 60 to Addison, 75 to Hawkinson. And then you're feeling like, wow, this is going really well. And that's where you almost can't even find enough targets for all of those guys. We were talking the other night about Mike Clay from ESPN having projected JJ McCarthy to throw 600 passes. And when I put it that way, because I remember saying like, hey, I don't know, that's a lot. But then when you put it that way, like, oh, maybe. Mr. Mayor says Jefferson, Thielen, and Naylor in that order feels like a very quality wide receiver room for week one. So is that the order, or is it Naylor, or is it not really even? It's probably not even really how it works with a number 2 and a 3. It's just probably 1 and then everybody else. That's how it probably works. But in terms of target share, if Thielen got the second most targets and Naylor made a couple of plays, then you are in very good shape, I think. Rob says, I honestly think that Thielen is a bigger upgrade for the Vikes than Parsons, and losing Clark for the Packers. Rob, I appreciate and respect how big of an addition you think Thielen is. Can't go there with you on the Micah Parsons thing. Clark just hasn't been that good, or wasn't that good last year, but that's pretty aggressive. That's probably a little bit too far. But I think that there is a domino effect to Adam Thielen being acquired by the Vikings, which is that no longer do you have to look at Jalen Naylor and go, why aren't you just like the other guys? Why aren't you just like Addison and just like Jefferson when this is a 5th round pick who is a very good player, but he showed that last year. Like, he's a better player than the practice squad guys. He's a better player than guys who don't make it, but he's not on the level of the others where Adam Thielen has been there. Thielen has been maybe not quite Jefferson's level, but he's been on the level of a Jordan Addison. He's been higher than that, than a Jordan Addison before, whereas Naylor is kind of a typical number 3 or 4. Thielen is a unique number 3 or 4 as someone who formerly was a 1A or 1B, depending on which order that given week with him and Diggs. Chris says Jefferson should still get a ton of targets. Need to see Naylor not drop the catchable passes in order to trust him. Agree with that. It's really the hands, I think, that are the most concerning with Jalen Naylor. And not only just because last year a 12%, 13% drop rate is much too high. In fact, I'm curious. I'm going to go check here where that is among wide receivers, like what's typical for a PFF drop rate, because there are different definitions of drops in the NFL. So I'm going to work on that with that drop rate, but that seems pretty high to me. And then you have a hand injury that is also in the mix here. That, like, what is he going to look like coming off of the hand injury? And are the hands going to be reliable even when they weren't when he was 100%? Let me see what's a good drop rate. Yeah, so Naylor's drop rate was the 11th highest in the league last year in a bad way. And you had guys like Valdez-Scantling, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. What do these guys have in common? A lot of unproven receivers. Alan Lazard, David Moore. Like, yeah, that is a drop rate that is too high for Jalen Naylor. He cannot have that drop rate if he's going to be a guy that becomes fully reliable for them. Rob says, just need Naylor to be what he was last season. We do need to consider that at 35, the injury risk of Thielen is higher. No, that's definitely true with Thielen. I mean, the hamstrings have been problematic for him a couple of times throughout his career. And you're right. I do think that they need Naylor to be what he was last season. I mean, if he catches 28 passes on 42 targets, and I mean, 6 touchdowns is kind of lofty, but if he does something in that ballpark, it should be pretty darn good. But I really wonder about these first 3 weeks. Like, that's good for a season total. Do they need 6, 7, 8 catches from him? Is Thielen's role going to be, because it's Adam Thielen, everyone's going to want, all right, he should be getting, the 1B targets to Justin Jefferson. And I mean, I don't think that they want it to be that way. Like, what's the snap count going to be? Is it going to be a snap count where Jalen Naylor is more of the number 2 receiver and he's out there a ton? Because he has been practicing with JJ the entire summer. So that is different. And maybe Thielen's playing 30, 35 snaps. But, I'm going back and forth here because TJ Hawkinson showed up in a week and then played 60 snaps. And Thielen is on that level of experience and on that level of ability, football IQ wise. Mr. Mayer says to the FanDuel question of the day, depends on if Ben Johnson decides that he wants to go Eberflus and quadruple Jefferson. If he does that, Thielen should take a lot of targets. The question was percentage of targets that Jefferson is going to get in the first week against the Chicago Bears. No, that's a good point. And how did that work out for Eberflus? Terribly. It worked out terribly. He gave up huge plays downfield, but this might be a little different. If I'm Chicago and I'm seeing the news today that Jalen Naylor is optimistic, or the Vikings are optimistic for Jalen Naylor to play, so I'm going to say likely to play as of right now, barring a setback. What I'm thinking is, if I'm Chicago, well, let's make Jalen Naylor beat us. And when I see the Vikings trade for Adam Thielen, I'm thinking, let's see Adam Thielen beat us. Because last year, Jordan Addison beat them. It's a lot harder to just say, let's let Jordan Addison beat us, because Addison can, as a former first-round pick in his prime. If you want to play defense in a way that Addison is going to be the guy that you sort of give up opportunities to, well, he's going to roast you, and he did last year. I shot you 99. Should the Vikings try to trade for Trayvon Diggs to add to the cornerback depth? Coming off of an injury, I mean, as far as the way that Brian Flores plays football, he does want guys going for the ball. He does want guys who can turn over the football. But I just don't know that think of it this way, if they're having Adam Thielen take a pay cut to be here, I just don't see a lot more from money bags of the ownership who has spent, this is not the Twins we're talking about, they've spent like crazy this offseason to get Hargrave and Allen and Will Fries, and those are all signing bonuses. I mean, you better have some dollars hidden underneath the couch cushions in terms of paying out actual cash. So they may have run up to a point where you're like, all right, that's enough. That's a lot of millions of dollars that they've handed out this year in deals, and maybe they don't want to push it any farther. Or, I mean, is there really a deal there to be had with Trayvon Diggs? I haven't seen anyone say, maybe I'm wrong, I just haven't seen anyone say that he is on the trade market. And I think once we reach Monday, everybody's playing, like there's no more trade options. If, Stephon Gilmore hasn't even visited, or I haven't seen any reports that he has, I think this is your cornerback unit. And they're going to play a lot of big nickel. This is where Harrison Smith's availability will be something to watch this week. Like, can they play three safeties? Are we going to see Jay Ward out there playing to start the season with three safeties? Or is it Jeff Okudah playing 50, 60 snaps? I mean, there's a lot of questions to be answered with the cornerback group for sure. Jay says, what about Peppers, safety cornerback? I think that Jabril Peppers, who was released by the Patriots, I mean, I think he is the type of fit that you'd be looking for. But why did they release him? That is a question for me. Why did they release Julius Peppers when he's had such good numbers the last couple of years? Has he fallen off? There was some off-field concerns, I think, with him most recently? I don't know. I don't know if they want to get into that. That would only be if Harrison Smith was out for the year. My understanding is this is not something that's going to keep him out for the season. If he was out for the year, then I would say, yeah, I mean, go get Jabril Peppers if you can. As of right now, I don't know. Ron says, as long as JJ doesn't start forcing the ball to Jefferson, that will be certainly one of the things to watch in this first week. Because if you're a quarterback, and we always talk about, hey, Jefferson makes these guys easier, or makes life easier for these guys, makes life easier. Nick Mullins, right? Nick Mullins was able to come in, force the ball to Jefferson, and it was great to force the ball to Jefferson. There were a bunch of times where Sam Darnold forced the ball to Jefferson, and it worked out wonderfully. But you also want to understand, if you're JJ McCarthy, like there's a lot of weapons here to go around. Like, you don't have to force it to him every time, but that's delicate because you also don't want to stay away from him because he's getting double covered. Like, oh, he's double covered, let me just go to Thielen underneath. Oh, he's double covered, let me just, try Naylor instead. Well, the problem is that he's always going to be double covered, and there's only so much KOC can do. Sometimes you just got to fit it in there. And that's where the arm strength does come into it, is like, can you fit it in to those tight windows? I think he can, but that chemistry might take some time to come around with JJ and Jefferson, with the fact that, he just hasn't been there in training camp. And Mr. Mayer says, doesn't feel like McCarthy is going to feel forced to go to Jefferson after barely throwing to him in camp. I don't know how that will impact it. Will it impact the timing? Will there be no impact whatsoever because he's Justin freaking Jefferson and he's just that good and it's not going to matter? Will he, look at other receivers? Now, Addison being suspended might matter to this, because if Addison was still there, he and Addison had tremendous chemistry. So he might have started leaning on Addison a little bit more early on, but not having Addison either, I don't know how he's going to distribute the ball. I really don't, because historically, most of the quarterbacks for the Minnesota Vikings have just thrown to Justin Jefferson. It's been fine. But you have more. I mean, this is the most in terms of weapons that they, I think, have ever had since I've been covering the team. Probably I mean, is it, maybe it's just too much. You shouldn't ever mention 1998 because it's just so ridiculous and so impossible to recreate with the three deep and with Robert Smith and just the offensive line that they had and everything else. It's impossible to recreate that with the Hall of Famers and Jake Reed, as good as he was. But this many options with Adam Thielen here now included, that's a lot to work with for JJ McCarthy, but I imagine it could be a little bit overwhelming at times. Jeff says run the ball in screenplays, but that really depends on how it's going, I think. Just how it's going. If it's going really well throwing the football, then just keep doing it. I do think that setting up him for play action is really, really important. The play action stats from Sam Darnold last year were so incredibly good. He was, I think, the second highest QB rating in the league when running play action. Like Kevin O'Connell, he comes from that world of play actions and bootlegs and all that sort of stuff that starts, a long time ago with the West Coast offense and sprint outs and stuff like that, but really became incredibly popular after Mike Shanahan used it to help John Elway win his 2 Super Bowls. And then Gary Kubiak gets some incredible seasons out of Matt Schaub running play actions and bootlegs. And it's gone from there, and it's grown out to Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan because Mike Shanahan was in Washington and Matt LaFleur is on his coaching staff. And what do? They build the pass off the run with play action. Then Kevin O'Connell was on the staff with Jay Gruden in Washington, where they were good at that too. And then goes out and is with Sean McVay and ends up, they win the Super Bowl there with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford and the whole thing, right? And then he gets to Kirk. And I thought in 2022, at times, I thought that they were asking Kirk to be a little too much Matthew Stafford from the shotgun, like not under center quite enough. And then in 2023, they found a good balance for it. And last year, Sam Darnold under center was a really good quarterback. I think Pro Football Reference has those stats under splits that I used at some point. And JJ McCarthy comes from Jim Harbaugh, loves to be under center. Like setting up those play actions will be very important to lean on the run. I don't think that the run has to be the driving force of this team, though, with everybody in the mix. Now, if Naylor was hurt and they couldn't trade for Thielen and they had gotten Trey Palmer or something, then I think I'd be saying, Jordan Mason, strap up your cleats pretty darn tight because you're going to need to run the football a lot. So I do think that it is a little bit different now with Jalen Naylor being back in action, or at least we suppose that he is based on the report. Things could change. George says Adam Thielen will benefit in the red zone with his route running. His precise routes will mask his 35-year-old speed deficit. The red zone should be big there. I don't need touchdowns to go to Justin Jefferson as much as you just need touchdowns, right? I think Jefferson would like to catch some more, but the opportunities for other wide receivers are robust when Justin Jefferson is getting so much attention. And Thielen's always been great. Those short area type of plays, a little in and out quick. As you mentioned, I thought that if you missed the Mike Kay interview the other day, guy who covers the Panthers, he had such great details on what Adam Thielen still is a couple years later. And he's very, very technically sound. And that is what drives him to be a good 35-year-old wide receiver, is that he's technically very good and has the same, maybe even better vision for defenses than he had earlier in his career. But he always had that. The route running is not going to slump. And in the red zone, you're right. It's huge because Naylor was just a non-factor there. And that's where I talk about being dynamic. He was more or less a non-factor. JP says, with Thielen being more suited to short and intermediate routes, does that limit his use given the system requires wide receivers to know and be prepared for every route? I think off the bat for week 1, I would say yes. That's not questioning whether Thielen can put in the work and get the playbook, under his feet or whatever, but it's just the reality. For wide receivers, this has to be one of the deeper and more difficult playbooks in the NFL. And you go back to 2022, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and Kirk Cousins, they were all at times looking at each other like, whew, this is more challenging than it was with Gary Kubiak or Clint Kubiak or Kevin Stefanski. Like, this is asking a lot more out of us as wide receivers. So you drop him back into this environment. I'm sure he remembers a lot of it, but I made this comparison to if you took Spanish in 5th grade and then you got to 7th grade and they told you had to go back and learn and you didn't take any more Spanish. Oh yeah, you got to go back and learn it again. You'd pick it up eventually, but right off the bat, you're going to be like, now how does this go? So I do think that that is correct, that it might limit the snap count. And that's why Naylor coming back is really important. It might limit it to some extent. And I don't mean limit it to 5, but it might not be 50 for Adam Thielen right off the bat. It's probably going to be more of, as you mentioned, in the red zone, underneath opportunities, things like that. Expose says, can you answer a lot of media predicting the Vikings will be last in the division? Am I wearing rose-tinted glasses to think this team will be even better with JJ? Or did this team actually get better? Well, I think that they're a better team overall, like a better overall team from top to bottom. But circumstances change every year in the NFL. I think they have, if we just go through it, I think they have a much stronger offensive line, much stronger than last year. I mean, that thing was taped together. Garrett Bradbury, as much as I thought he could have used more help at guard, and I didn't think he was as bad as some of the internet, but, you know, that's a big upgrade to Ryan Kelly, who's been a top 10 guy for his entire career, including late career. And Will Fries, that's a huge upgrade. And Donovan Jackson, talent-wise, is a big upgrade from Blake Brandel. The defensive line, much better, much, much better. And I saw some data today on, run stopping and Harrison Phillips that maybe insinuated that he wasn't the same as he was earlier in his career for some of the numbers. And the PFF grades kind of looked that way. And Jalen Redmond had great PFF grades against the run. Maybe you even upgrade there. He won the battle in camp. And you have much more interior pressure. I mean, the cornerback position, we have hemmed and hawed over it a lot, but is Jeff Okudah different than Shaq Griffin was last year arriving here? Probably not. I think Isaiah Rodgers is better than where Stephon Gilmore was last year. Byron Murphy's still here. So I think overall, and then Jordan Mason, the backfield, they are a more talented football team from top to bottom. Circumstances are different. The Packers have Micah Parsons now. The Bears are better. I mean, they can't be worse than where they were last year with Eberflus. I mean, I guess they're the Bears, so they could always be worse. But I think logically speaking, they've invested a lot of money. And Ben Johnson is a better offensive mind than Shane Waldron. And Eberflus was just lost when it came to dealing with his quarterback. So everything, they're better. And the divisions you play are better. The NFC East is a beast. It's good. The AFC North, it's good. Outside of Cleveland. So, I understand why, though, because, all right, picking them to be behind the Bears, to me, all right, well, that they do that every year because all the national folk love Chicago. That's always been the case. It's a huge market. It's an enormous fan base. Like, they know it moves the needle with Chicago. So if anybody's putting the Vikings behind Chicago, I don't understand that at all. If they're saying, well, it's unclear if McCarthy is any good, it's pretty unclear if Caleb Williams is any good as well. And the Vikings defense is a lot better than what Chicago's is talent-wise. So I would have a tough time putting Chicago ahead of the Vikings. The other three, pick your order. I think 3 of them make the playoffs. I think all 3 of those, I think the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, again, make the playoffs. If things go right, if there's no quarterback injury, the best versions of those teams all make the playoffs, I think. So whatever order you put them in, you can make a pretty good argument for it. I would not have said that about the Packers before Micah Parsons, but he's really good. Confidence in Jalen Naylor. I'm getting to that part of the chat. 5 out of 10 from Fanny. 5.5 out of 10 from Chris. 3.5 from Not Completely Insane. 3 from Steve. 5 from Gazinkad. 4 from Mr. Mayor. And if the hand is fully healed, maybe a 6 from Gazinkad. I think I'm about in the same ballpark. It's probably more like a 4.5 for me, where we've seen him do it. We have seen him perform pretty well, but we've also seen some of the downsides that made him a 5th-round draft pick and that have not developed. And we've even seen some of that still in training camp with the drops. And how much does it matter that his calves are thicker now? Well, that's another question as well. It helps for Naylor maybe to be a little stronger through contact, maybe a little stronger blocking. Does that fundamentally change it? And if the hand is not 100% healed, that would be a pretty big concern. Brian's up to a 6. I think that that's where you probably live, is somewhere between a 4 and a 6 in confidence in Jalen Naylor. Richard says, who has more production game 1, Thielen or Naylor? So production, are we going yards or are we going receptions? It really depends on how the Bears play, I think, because there's the potential for some deep shots to Naylor, but I would go Thielen in terms of receptions. Naylor, it's possible that it could be more yardage because you're looking at more intermediate or downfield. I probably think Thielen, just in part because he is so much of a quarterback's best friend. And you heard it, and you saw those numbers or heard the numbers from Bryce Young throwing to Thielen. I reference them time and time again. Is like, isn't this exactly what you want for JJ McCarthy? So if Thielen becomes another security blanket that is open a lot and that he can throw to 5 or 6 times in the game, that's hard to see Naylor being that guy. Naylor seems to be like a little bit more of boom or bust from week to week. And when we look at his production from last year, that was really the case. It was really the case that it was Naylor getting 5 catches for 80 yards or 0 a lot of times. Not completely insane. Says, question for you. What do you think of the odds percentage-wise are that Micah Parsons finishes the season healthy and having not missed any games? Parsons missed some games last year, still played 700 snaps. Previous years, he was almost at 900. I don't think he's an injury-prone player. I think that NFL players get banged up. What I think is that Vikings fans are hoping and trying to speak these things into existence. Trying to speak into existence, like maybe he'll ruin their locker room. Maybe he'll get hurt. Maybe the Packers will have given up Kenny Clark, who was the key to their run defense, and now they'll be bad. Like, I do think they're going to be a little more vulnerable against the run, but there's no downplaying the impact of that guy. There's nothing on the stat sheet that you can find where you'd go, oh, that's the secret to Micah Parsons being a bust in Green Bay. More likely than not, Micah Parsons will be amazing in Green Bay, and you're going to have to work around it, and you're going to have to beat him. But last time I checked, you have to beat good teams if you want to be a champion. So you're going to have to earn it in the NFC North. All of the money spent, all of the planning, all the drafting that has gone right or wrong, all of the work that's been put into JJ McCarthy, all that stuff, it's all going to be tested. It's all going to be tested. Let's see. I got you the FanDuel question of the day, but I also want to remind you of one of our other sponsors, which is ZipRecruiter. I know that a lot of you out there either own your own businesses or you are in a management position where you hire people, and boy, it can be a headache. You have to sort through all sorts of resumes from people who aren't qualified and end up overlooking the best candidates sometimes. It can be tough, but it is not tough with ZipRecruiter for all of your hiring needs. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you fast, and right now you can try it for free. ZipRecruiter.com/audio, AUDIO. It is that easy. You got to try it. You can use their smart technology that finds great candidates for you quickly, or use the invite to apply button that allows you to reach out to your favorite candidates. Lots of ways for ZipRecruiter to work for you. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So make sure you try it for free. Again, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. That is ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. So there you go. The Vikings don't have to recruit more wide receivers because Naylor looks like he's back. Am I right? DS says only if Naylor had Thielen's hands and Adam had Naylor's speed. You're right. That would be a super receiver. Well, Adam was fast early in his career, and I don't think that he's dreadfully slow now. It's just not like it used to be. But a lot of times is how often for Adam Thielen does he have to burn somebody? Not very often. It's more of, and what they need Naylor to do is Naylor can burn somebody, but what they need him to do is to be open in all areas of the field and then make the plays when it's there. He can't just be they know what is going to happen here. I thought at times the Vikings offense, and all credit to everyone involved last year, 14-win season, we can't tear down too much. I thought that there was some predictable nature to certain guys' roles, certain guys' routes, certain situational type stuff, when they were going to run the football, what they wanted Jalen Naylor to do. And that's why being more dynamic is important. Andrew says if Thielen is 100%, he beats out Naylor every time on skill alone. They call him speedy, not catchy. That's good. That's good, Andrew. If he is catchy, though, then the speed is going to matter. I do agree that Thielen's hands are going to be such a big factor for the offense of being able to stay on the field, get a 3rd and 6 by getting 8 yards to Adam Thielen. Things like that are so big for him. And yes, he does have to stay healthy. We always go on the presumption that guys will, unless there's a really disturbing history. So if that happens, then you might be right that by the time Addison gets back, they're going to have, let's just say it goes like this. Let's say Thielen has 12 catches for 110 yards through his first 3 games, and Naylor has like 3 or 4, and maybe one of them is a deep shot. You're going to have Thielen be on the field a lot more when Jordan Addison comes back. Mr. Mayer says Naylor's deep downfield skills overlap too much with Jefferson. Feels like Thielen fills a different niche. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. That it was a little bit on the redundant side. Now, you do need guys to run clear outs. It's not exciting that when you run a dagger concept, which I mention all the time because they do it all the time, somebody's got to be out there running the fake route and be like, throw it to me. And, then you break off your underneath ball to Justin Jefferson. Somebody has to be that guy. Adam Thielen's not convincing as that guy. That might have to be Jordan Addison a little bit more, or still have Jalen Naylor mixing in. What is the average depth of target for Justin Jefferson? I could find that out. It's down the field. It's definitely down the field. It's not one of the deepest, I don't think. Let me see. Okay. Let me see here. I will find this answer for you. So it was 11.7 yards for Justin Jefferson, average depth of target. Very similar to Nico Collins, Tyler Lockett. Actually, Adam Thielen was 11.7 last year, so he was close. And that's what, we're making Adam Thielen sound like he is a glorified tight end, but his average depth of target was the same as Jefferson last year, so he was going downfield. Daniel, tell me Darisaw and Fries are healthy and ready. Well, Fries should be. Darisaw is a little more up in the air. That's where we're going to see if he's on the injury report or not. If he is and, goes in questionable, I guess we'll see. Maybe they want to take advantage of that anyway. Like, oh, well, he did miss some practice over the summer. He's questionable, but I think that Darisaw should be back. I don't want to make any promises there. Chris says, are we caught up in the immediate moment of Addison's suspension? How will it look when Addison is back? Red zone with 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end. Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, Thielen, Jones could be devastating. It should be. It really should be. And this all kind of circles back to, how important the Thielen trade is when we start adding up the number of options for J.J. McCarthy. The whole concept, though, from the beginning with Kevin O'Connell. Even you go to 2023, there were a lot of discussions about maybe they should draft a quarterback, or not quarterback. Well, there was a little quarterback. Corner is what I meant. Cornerback in 2023. and they said, nah, let's go wide receiver. Let's get another weapon here. And even recently, drafting Ty Felton was, let's just make sure we get another weapon. Trading for TJ Hawkinson was a move with Kirk still here, but it was, let's get another weapon. Kevin O'Connell and I are very much on the same page on, you know what? I'm thinking one more receiver, one more tight end, one more running back, somebody to make play with the football. And as JJ McCarthy goes to start his career this week, now that Thielen is here, if Naylor is back to at least close enough to 100% with his hand injury, that is as good of a group of weapons as anybody has ever started a career with. Brock Purdy in 2022, that was when he made his debut and he won those 5 games and tore his arm in the playoff game. But before that, got them to the brink of the Super Bowl. Maybe would have beat the Eagles that year had Brock Purdy been healthy. That group of weapons was pretty freaking good. That was really, really good because I think they had just gotten McCaffrey, Samuel, Ayuk, Kittle, Trent Williams. If you look around, I mean, Jalen Hurts his first time at the Super Bowl. Dallas Goedert, they trade for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. It's pretty close. This is as good as you could put on the field around a young quarterback. If he can't get it done with these guys, then that's going to be pretty concerning. Ron says having a hard time believing in Naylor. I think that's a fair opinion because you've only seen just the occasional big play from him and not consistency. So that's where, with him practicing all summer long with McCarthy, I wonder, can he prove that? Can he prove that there is something more there consistency-wise than there was last year, where it was just the occasional downfield? And look, we've been calling Naylor this for a while. He's a deep shot guy. He's downfield guy. He's Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But that was with somebody else at quarterback. And that was with a guy at quarterback who kind of only threw that ball and led the NFL in total yards of downfield passing. Dystopian Utopia 5 would be nice for the amount of confidence you could have in Jalen Naylor. Yeah, I'm like at a 4.5. And with the hand injury, that's probably the half. 11 for Jefferson. These confidence levels go to 11. 8 for Hawkinson, 5 for Thielen. Oh, you're talking about targets. Okay. I thought you were talking about confidence levels. And I'm like, I kind of agree with you that out of 10, Justin Jefferson confidence levels 11. Targets for Monday night. That was the FanDuel question of the day, is what percentage of the targets. But if it was 11 for Jefferson, 8 for Hawkinson, 5 for Thielen, and 3 for Jones and Oliver, you're in pretty good shape there. I'll just say Blunts here asks, besides injuries, what would sink the ship this year? Corners? I think it would be coverage. Yeah. Because when you look at last year, so here's a stat that if you guys like to be nervous about the Vikings, that's a thing you do. Otherwise, you would have cheered for some other team by now. So I'll throw this out there to you. So I looked up all the teams in the Super Bowl era that have gone to the Super Bowl. And I only found 8 out of, I want to say it was 116 or something, whatever. It was only 8, so less than 10%. That gave up 4,000 or more yards passing and reached the Super Bowl. Now, I know some of that you could cut out pretty much everything until like the 80s when quarterbacks didn't throw for 4,000 yards or they were playing 14 games. So let's even say that all of that would have happened within the last 30 years. Even then, it's pretty darn rare for teams to allow 4,000 or more yards passing and reach the Super Bowl. Well, the Vikings last year allowed more than 4,000 yards passing. Again, with caveats, 17 games. And I understand the issues with that stat, but I think you get the point that if you're not top notch at slowing down opposing teams' passing games, it's pretty hard to go into the playoffs and face 3 really good quarterbacks, more likely than not. And more likely than not, it's either great passing teams or the Eagles, who are, if the Vikings face the full strength, best of the best Eagles, best version of themselves with this D-line, can you stop them from running the football? That would be somewhat of a question. Is their defense against the run I mean, other than, JJ McCarthy just isn't that good. Like, obviously that's the clear answer, but Theo Jackson, I really like a lot. Been talking about Theo Jackson for so long. It's like, hey guys, finally, after 2 years of talking about Theo Jackson, like he's finally going to play. But if you end up with, an injury to Byron Murphy and it's Jeff Okudah and Isaiah Rodgers, or if Harrison Smith is out for a more significant amount of time and you're playing someone like Jay Ward a lot, or Josh Metellus doesn't transition into playing deep safety as well, like the coverage and the opposing quarterbacks are not going to be forgiving outside of maybe week one, but they're not going to be forgiving when it comes to a week-to-week basis with these quarterbacks when you start to face Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson. Like, you've just got some of the best passers in the NFL. That would be the thing right there that could make life a lot more difficult. On the offensive side, the only thing to me would just be the interior of the O-line isn't what it was supposed to be. If Jackson struggles, if there's health issues, if Fries just isn't as good as $17 million would suggest, that might hold them back a bit. But when you go through this roster, it is kind of hard to find spots where you would have massive concerns outside of, to some extent, the secondary. But they've had a lot worse secondaries. They have definitely had a lot worse secondaries with Brian Flores and still gotten good results. Blunts, maybe it's because number 9 hasn't played too many snaps, but am I wrong to be a teeny tiny bit skeptic about this season? Would KOC put in Wentz if they started 1-3? Don't take Chicago too seriously. I don't think there's any scenario where Carson Wentz could come in. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical about this season because there are a lot of questions still to be asked. The way I look at it is the NFC has so often in recent years been determined by roster strength. Do we have the better 53 than you? And I think the Vikings are up there in the top 3 or 4 with overall roster strength. They've got the megastar talents in Grenard and Jefferson. They've got the B+ talents kind of all over the field. In the backfield and the other wide receivers and the D-line. And, Van Ginkel probably deserves that superstar talent as an all-pro, second-team all-pro last year. So they have a super strong team around J.J. McCarthy. But if you're skeptical, how can I blame you? Because every time this Vikings team over the last how long has posted one of those 12, 13, 14 win seasons, the next year, the regression has come for them. And I think that the reason they handled this offseason the way that they did was because they know that. They know that the schedule gets harder. They know that things don't break your way at the end of games all the time like they have at certain times during O'Connell's tenure. So they went out to get stronger defensive tackles. They went out to get better offensive linemen. They went out to get a better backfield, all those things to stave off regression and to fight it off. But if you're not going into this season saying, well, they should just win 14 and blow everybody away, and there's skepticism about McCarthy and so forth because he hasn't played, that's certainly fair. Every NFL team outside of probably Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City is probably asking a lot of those same questions. In Philadelphia, they're always very confident in Philadelphia with their football team, but they'll boo them if they go 3 and out in the first drive. Jay says we need Adam to be on the field as much as possible, especially the red zone. That's a big question for me. How often is Adam Thielen going to be on the field? Is it going to be just a handful of plays when they want to go 3 wide receivers and then they use a lot of Josh Oliver? Is it the majority of the plays? Is it as a main target? Is it more of just a role? Like, I don't think we really know the answer to any of that yet until we actually see it. Let's see. Chris says, how are the cornerback matchups versus Vikings wide receivers this year? Well, Jalen Johnson for week 1, and then we're gonna have to see. Atlanta's not impressive. Cincinnati is sure not impressive. Pittsburgh is going to be one heck of a test. That's for sure. Jalen Ramsey is on Pittsburgh now, if you guys forgot. Cleveland's got good corners still. I think we were all expecting at some point that They would trade some of those corners and maybe start tanking, but that might have to wait until the trade deadline for Cleveland. That's not the easiest start. That's where the first 3 weeks I think are really good for JJ McCarthy and for this receiving core to get some chemistry going on, because they don't exactly face some of the best defenses and best corners in the NFL. Outside of Jalen Johnson is really darn good, and you guys have certainly see that before. Nathan says, I couldn't believe Adam Thielen's separation numbers were that good last year. I mean, that's the thing. He had a great season for Carolina. They were going downfield, and that's why I don't want to talk about him. I mean, it makes sense logically, right, to have more underneath stuff for Adam Thielen, because the other guys do run deep routes. That is their job. But the average depth of target and separation and all those, like all those numbers for Thielen were really good. And he was still catching 75% of passes his way last season. So maybe raw, pure speed isn't always what gets guys open. It's, knowledge of defenses. It's the route running technique. Larry Fitzgerald did it for years. Route running technique, hands, all those things. But you're right, those separation numbers. And a lot of it is also like when you find a hole in a zone, those data points can be a little bit wonky, because Justin Jefferson rarely has amazing separation numbers, but he's being pressed all the time. He's being doubled all the time. And there's usually a defender near him when the ball arrives. And, a lot of times teams are playing like man with another guy on him, and then they play something else over on the other side, like a zone. So, someone like Thielen getting into the spaces of a zone, that can make it look like separation, even though he wasn't snapping somebody off on a route, but that's still very good. That's still doing the job that you're asked to do. Let's see. Dwayne says should be a good year for the NFC North. If you like football, it is. If you are the Vikings, then you're not happy with Micah Parsons. Like, I've seen it for several days now. All the just hoping and dreaming that Micah Parsons doesn't do what he's probably going to do in Green Bay. And I think that now I'm not telling you how to cheer. I'm not telling you how to think about your team. Okay. Cause that's not what I do. Like, you can feel however you want. From my seat, I'd be like, all right, let's go. Let's play football. Here we go. They got another great player, but you've got a lot of great players, and go win. Because if you're going to win this, guess what? If you're going to win the Super Bowl, or if you're going to get to the Super Bowl, you'll never believe this. You'll probably have to play another team that has great players. So you got them in your division. If you can beat them, then you can prove something. Kroll, you're going to tell me how to say that one. Krawll. Thielen is a better receiver, even at 35, than Jalen Nailor. That's true. That's just flat out true, that he is a better all-around wide receiver. He's one of the better receivers of the last 10 years in the NFL overall at all the receiver stuff. And Naylor is a guy whose career high is 28 receptions. So yeah, I think that that's definitely true. My big question is just, can they carve out the right roles for both of those guys to still contribute after Addison comes back? And how much are they going to lean on him in the first 3 weeks? Because there's no way to just be like, if Naylor catches 2 passes in the first couple weeks, it's fine. Like, it's probably not fine. You need him to be a significant receiver on this team, even if that's 4 catches over the first couple of weeks. Like, if that's 3-4 catches a game, and they have other people, but you can't have your number 2 wide receiver. I would say probably number 2 as of right now, if we're doing it that way, just because he's going to have to play the whole game. I don't know if you could play Adam Thielen the whole game right away. Should be interesting. Red has 0 faith in Speedy. When I asked the 1 to 10, how much faith, most answers were somewhere between 3 and 6. But I understand that there's not a lot of faith. I would not put it at 0. Would not put it at 0, because he's proven last year that he can make some big plays. Red says Laviska Shenault did not know he was available. A kick returner, punt returner, seems like a typical Kwesi reclamation. Yeah, they do stuff like that. Shenault, man, he was pretty good when he first got to the league, and it just has not gone the way that I thought it was going to go. I thought that he was going to take off and be like a Deebo Samuel, and he just got hurt. And once those guys get hurt, it's just not the same. Even with Deebo Samuel, it's not the same. Jay's going with a 4. Jay says Felton is a skinny rookie, needs more weight and experience. Yeah, that's why right now you feel pretty good about having Naylor ahead of him, because if Felton had to be in there, that would be pretty tough for him to take on a bigger role. And I would guess it would have to be a lot of Josh Oliver. Chris says Thielen will be big in Felton's development. Great player to help with the route running tree. Yep, I agree with that. Red said Lucky had his chance to overtake Naylor and he dropped it. He did, but I don't think that Lucky Jackson was ever going to be the guy that they went to instead of Adam Thielen or even instead of Jalen Naylor. It was, this guy is the in case of emergency. Like that was the situation for Lucky Jackson. And then they kind of got into a bit of an emergency, and it was, they were going to acquire somebody. It was going to be Kendrick Bourne. It was going to be somebody off waivers, Valdez Scantling, whoever. They weren't going to go with Lucky Jackson. He is the break glass in case of emergency guy to be bumped up because he's good enough to be out there in practice and running the right routes, and probably not good enough to play on a week-to-week basis in the NFL. It's a hard place to be. And as you heard my interview from him, Lucky Jackson, really bright dude, crazy story of working his way here. And you'd love to see a guy like that succeed. It's just when the expectations are what they are, you have to make moves like this to get Thielen. You have to hope that Naylor takes another step. You can't kind of, hey, we're going to go with this guy who's completely unproven. Kit says, do you think Felton could have it click like Jefferson did a few weeks into the season, allowing him to pass Naylor like JJ passed BC Johnson? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's really much to compare there. Justin Jefferson is, well, that was the COVID camp where he missed a good portion of it because he had COVID, and it was 2020. So they only had 2 weeks or something of training camp to get ready. That was the only reason that happened. It's sort of become one of those lore things where that always gets left out. Like, oh, can you believe Zimmer started BC Johnson? Well, there was a reason they did that. It was because Jefferson was still getting ramped up from having missed part of a shortened training camp already and needed a couple of weeks before he was, I mean, I'm sure he would tell you now that he was ready to go week 1, but I think that's why they did that. With Felton, I think he needs an entire year. I think the better comp for him is KJ Osborne, where the first year we just didn't really see him. I guess that's a bust pick or whatever. And then the next year you go, whoa, okay, wow. All right, this guy can play. I agree with, got to put on weight, got to learn route running details. I think he could be in the game right now if they needed him to be, but not for a full breadth of snaps. It would be more of like 10 snaps for Felton. We might see that. They seem to really like him with the football in his hands, and I think he's going to be the kick returner. So he's going to get a chance to show you what he can do. Expose, do you think that this is a place where future negotiations will allow the Vikings to get people for cheap, whether it's new deals or people here or free agents? I don't really think that they got players for cheap this offseason, and this was about as good as you're ever going to have for this offseason. I think they paid market price for Allen and Hargrave, paid market price for Aaron Jones, maybe a little above. Market price or a bit above for Byron Murphy Jr., bringing Harrison Smith back. Like, I think that they have paid the prices, and then their extensions. They give out the extension to Andrew Van Ginkel at a pretty good dollar figure. I don't think that the NFL really works too often like you get free agents on the cheap. It's more, Thielen and having him take a pay cut is a pretty unique situation because he wanted to come back to Minnesota so badly, and they worked that in. So instead of Carolina taking on some of his cap, the Vikings take on his cap hit and his cash. They just pay him a little bit less. He wanted to be here. It all works out for everybody. They could carry over some cap for next year. But as far as, like, you got to pay what you got to pay, and they're going to have to redo Jonathan Grenard's deal. That's a lock that they're going to have to redo Jonathan Grenard's deal. So there's things into the future. There will be some things to work with the cap that are not going to be the easiest. But I don't think that we're going to see any any team be so wonderful to play for that guys are going to go, oh no, like pay me a lot less. They might take a little bit less than another team, but maybe if they're in the Super Bowl, I don't know, but I would be surprised by that. Let's see. Jay thinks that Dallas Turner will not have a breakout year because there's too many good edge rushers on the field. That is another question that I can't wait to see answered, because we asked them all off season, and then like now we're finally here. Isn't that the best part of getting football to arrive? Is like all these things we've wondered about. How is this going to look? And then we finally get to find out what Dallas Turner's role is. I think he's going to be on the field a lot. I think he's going to be on the field for 600 snaps would be my guess right now. And if there's injuries, it's going to be more than that. Now, what does he do as far as sacks? What does he do as far as pressures or, anything else like that? We're going to have to find out. But I think he had a really good camp and he was in a good place. And I was being asked, one day about comments about how he wasn't having a good camp. And I was like, I guess I'm going to have to change my contacts, because I think he's had a really, really strong camp overall. He's not going to play as much as Van Ginkel and Grenard, but Brian Flores is getting into the lab to get Dallas Turner on the field quite a bit. And, that's the other thing is I mentioned this before, and I banned any draft talk until the end of the season. Then we could talk about who they're going to draft next year and what they've done in their past history and stuff. But if they have an elite defense and Dallas Turner plays a role and he doesn't get 10 sacks and he doesn't have crazy PFF grades or whatever, I don't care. Like, the final results are what are most important. They don't hand out rings for who had the highest percentage of draft picks hit. They hand it out for who wins the games. So I'm already sort of preparing myself for like, well, Dallas Turner only played 32 snaps and didn't, he only had 2 pressures, and we got to talk about that again. Like, I'm just curious to see what his role is going to be and how he takes another step if he does this year, because if he does, that is a major swing player for this team. And I'm not going to debate over, well, they gave up this much for this much and this. I don't care. Like, we are at the point now where it's results on the football field versus other football teams. Like, that's all we're talking about here and nothing else. Want to remind you, got another sponsor for the show, a friend of mine by the name of Denisa Tova and her team at Tova QDRO and Retirement Valuators, which may sound like a lot, but Denisa has a great podcast. And if you guys are like me and your knowledge of the lives of lawyers and judges, it's probably based entirely on just watching Law & Order. That's how it is for me. But she has a great podcast to learn about the real lives of the people in the law sphere. Denisa Tova's Beyond the Bar podcast. It is not deep in the weeds lawyer talk. It's real conversations with judges and lawyers about what life is really like working with the law, what makes them laugh, what drives them, what the real work-life balance of working in the law is like. And every so often, Denisa will have a surprise celebrity guest like me. I was on her show once. Not to talk about the law, but to talk about my book and stuff like that. Anyway, Beyond the Bar is like a locker room regroup with folks from across the legal field sharing how they got into the game and what they would tell rookies and how they're navigating this post-pandemic AI everywhere legal landscape. And off the mic, Denisa runs a forensic retirement lab if you are a divorced lawyer and your client's 401k and IRA was around before the marriage and now it's all blended together like a trick play gone wrong. She and her team will untangle that for you, clean and court ready, no fumbles. So you'll want to find Denisa's Settlement Language Lab, a free session for law firms like training camp for retirement drafting. If you want in, just type in Denisa Tova on LinkedIn and send her a message. If you heard of her on the show, include Purple Insider and tell her that you want to get in the Settlement Lab or you're curious about the podcast Beyond the Bar. So I appreciate Denisa for all of her support for this here show. Something coming up a little bit later, having a good chat here about Jalen Nailor, the optimism and his potential role and how you see him fitting with Thielen right away off the bat. Remember, FanDuel question of the day is with optimism about about Jalen Nailor, what do you think the percentage of targets that Jefferson will get against Chicago if they have their full bevy of receivers as of right now. Like, they don't have Addison clearly, but Naylor, Thielen, Hawkinson, Jones, Mason can catch the ball a little, Oliver. How much of that should go to Justin Jefferson? That is the FanDuel question of the day. Let's see. Chris says Turner does not have to have huge numbers this year to have a breakout year. Has to prove his value and where he was chosen in the draft. See, I don't think that the draft matters at all at this point. He's on the team and they're trying to win. So forget about that. That's not what you have to prove. You have to prove you can help this team compete for a Super Bowl. We got to move out of the mindset of fake championships. This team has been fake championships for a long time. Let's be honest. It's been fake championships. It's been, hopefully this team shows they've got something for the future. Hopefully they lose the last game so they can draft higher. Hopefully they show that KOC can actually kind of coach so they don't have to fire him in the first year and get somebody else, or he's not Matt Patricia or something. There's been just a lot of fake W's. This year is real ones. It's all about real ones. It's not about, well, they KOC proved he can coach because of Darnold or something. It's like, they got a good draft pick that they gave up something for. Like, none of that matters. If Dallas Turner has 3 sacks and plays 400 snaps and they have a number 1 defense, I don't care what they gave up for him. It just doesn't matter. That's what you're looking for. And I know people don't like that take because they love to decide who won what draft pick and everything else. That's just the fact of the matter to me, is the overall team results are all that matters in this. And if he does take another step and it's not this mind-blowing step that, quote, justifies the draft pick, if it's 4.5 sacks and an interception, a key pass breakup, and 35 pressures or something like that, and helps them get over the top to be a top 5 defense and win some games, that's really good. That's all, the only way I'll look at it. Chris says, let's see. Great point about the defensive line. Well, it might seem okay. It wasn't really on board. I wasn't really on board with trading Phillips because we might need him come January. Well, that's kind of the point that some of those numbers were making earlier today. I was looking at, and it was an analytics account. I can't remember what it was, just on Twitter, about like run stop percentage and where this is sort of like some next gen data of where the runner was stopped by that defensive tackle. And it wasn't too thrilling when it came to Harrison Phillips. And that matches up with his PFF grade with the run defense, which I know is not a perfect metric because it's a system and it's not just one guy and he has different roles and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is that earlier in his career, he had better numbers and they liked how Jalen Nailor and Levi Drake Rodriguez were performing behind him. I understand what you're getting at with Phillips, but I also think there's a little bit of like his first year, he played really well. And the last 2 years have started out well. And then I don't think that they've ended as strongly for him. And look, it was Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bullard next to him. Now it's Hargrave and it's Allen and it's, a couple guys that they like coming up. I don't think that that's a loss that you can't survive. And if it was, then KOC and Brian Flores would not have given it the thumbs up to move on from him. What they must have seen in training camp is just him getting beat out. And if you listen to the language when Kwesi talks about it, he really talks around the fact that he got beat out in camp. He talks around about like, well, the snap counts and maybe it's better that he's in New York and things like that. Just sounds like beat out to me, which is fine. That happens to veteran players. And if someone's expensive and they carry some value, then you move on. But I think that that's what happened, is that he just got beat out in training camp. Jack says, or Jack's Park, Hargrave and Allen being able to create pressure up the middle will help put our defense, will help our defensive backs big time. It's been a while since we've had interior push, 100%. And that's another bet they're making, is that you're going to get the best version of the corners and safeties that you have because of the pressure up front. And that is something, it's been a very, very long time since they've had. Jurgen says Jalen Johnson might not be available week one. I guess we'll have to see what happens there. If he's not, huge win for the Minnesota Vikings if he is not available. Mr. Mayer says there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about Turner moving forward. Maybe he turns into a top 5 guy. We don't know. Well, that's exactly right. Is that last year did not give you enough evidence to say, oh, Dallas Turner's going to be amazing. But it certainly didn't give you enough evidence to say he's going to be terrible. I mean, he was on the field in huge games for them down the stretch for 25, 35 snaps. He created some pressures. He got an interception. He got a couple of impressive sacks. I mean, at 21 years old, still learning the league, one of the youngest players in the NFL last year, and behind those two guys, it was the Indianapolis game that he came in for an injury with Van Ginkel and played really well. So I think we've seen the flashes from him to know that there's something there. We just have to find out what it is exactly is there. Chris says if JJ and Dallas pan out, nobody will care what we gave up for Dallas. I mean, I think if JJ McCarthy pans out, that this team will be extremely good and we won't have to do that. I mean, look, it's a long off season. I don't blame anybody for doing that. And this is the show that gets into the front office's seat. But sometimes I just reach a point with that where I'm like, okay, all right, this is too much. This is too much. Like, this is too much trying to tear apart every single like detail on one guy's, how much they traded for him and everything else when we're missing the forest through the trees. I think that's kind of the point, like the bigger picture. If they had drafted one guy to be the whole defense and they needed him to be a complete game changer and that was the only person. Well, first of all, if that was the case, he would have been on the field. Let's be real. If they had drafted him and they didn't have Van Ginkel or Grenard, he would have been on the field for 700 snaps last year, and it wouldn't be a surprise if he had gotten 7 or 8 sacks because of how quick he is. And we saw that in just a handful of pass rush snaps for last year, and then maybe we'd be talking about it differently because there's so much emphasis on the snaps there. I think he's got a chance to be a game changer with this defense because they can just be more dynamic and more confusing and deeper. And maybe from time to time, just, get Andrew Van Ginkel a breath. Like we're going to see. So, I mean, I'm fascinated by how they're going to use Dallas Turner. I just don't want to talk about what they gave up for him. And, Mr. Mayer says that's boring. I agree. I mean, that's just been beaten to death. Like, we've got to play some football games. But the actual role and the schematics of it with Dallas Turner, now that's worth talking about because there's so many options there. There's working him in on the edge to get him a lot of reps if Andrew Van Ginkel needs some rest and doesn't have to play every single snap, or Jonathan Grenard. But there's also looks that they were giving in training camp with Van Ginkel and Turner on the same side, and one of them dropped and one of them rushed, and then the opposite, and then they both rushed, and like there's options there. And if Turner can handle this role and he can make a difference off the edge with his quickness, his improved strength for this offseason, I think he probably put on 15, 20 pounds. I mean, that is really scary for opposing offenses. I think it also helps them handle, only really having 2 corners to have the extra outside linebacker on the field. How often can they do it though? That's another question. Blunt says, does Wes Phillips call plays or KOC pulling the strings? It is KOC and it will always be KOC as long as he's here. And it always should be KOC. That's one of the strangest criticisms I hear of the Vikings is when people say KOC isn't good at calling plays. That to me is just complete madness. He has some tendencies that we have critiqued in the past. One of them being like not leaning on the run when you're ahead. And even when you're running successfully, we've been over that. The trick plays, the screen passes, like stuff like that. But the bigger picture on getting some of the best Kirk Cousins play that he ever had. How about late game play calling when you win, 90% of your 1-score games? How many game-winning drives from Kirk, from Sam Darnold, Jefferson's production, Addison's production, Hawkinson's production, the offense taking a guy in Sam Darnold who had done nothing in his career to a top 10 quarterback last year. gosh, the offensive line that was just taped together and surviving that and having big games like that, there's a lot of play calling that goes into all that success. When I ran across the stat and it really blew my mind that when Kirk or Darnold has started, they're 31-11 in the regular season. And like he should be calling plays forever. And that's actually a major benefit of having an offensive coach is that you can have him call plays with JJ McCarthy. And it's not like if you have a good season, then your OC is going to leave and then your quarterback has to learn a new system. Andrew says, why has Van Ginkel been so quiet in training camp? He was banged up in camp. But the thing about the way that Vikings handle stuff is if you're a veteran player, if you're 30 years old and you're banged up at all, you're just not practicing. Just don't. They need you for 17 games. It's too important. If you got to work yourself back up to 100% during the games, you'd rather have that and have a lot of games than someone get hurt in camp and not be able to start the season. But we will keep an eye on that when the injury report comes out. Like, is he back to 100% at this point? I'm just going to go with Crawl. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Who identifies with the UDFAs and who does the draft picks? Why can we hammer undrafted kids and fail on top talent? Well, I think that the undrafted free agents, I asked Flores this last year, I think, about the undrafted free agents. He said that the biggest thing is they try to identify one thing that a guy does well that fits with what they do well. So we play this type of defense at the corner position, for example, and this is what we're looking for. So I think that, Flores likes size at the cornerback position. We've seen a few guys they brought in. McLaughlin's one of them. Vaughn is another one where they like size there. And this is what they're looking for with this type of scheme. And here's the things you're going to have to do. And maybe it's zone coverage that these guys are good at. Like McLaughlin's a great example. I don't think McLaughlin is a lockdown corner as a UDFA, but he could play the football. So if you get him in zones and he's good at identifying plays and playing the football, you might have something there where another team that plays a lot of man might not. That's just a small detail. I think that's part of it. But when you only draft like 4 players per year because they have moved a lot of their draft picks, that also hurts your possibility of hitting on a ton of picks. That's another thing as well. Two Dog Dad says the Micah Parsons and Jonathan Grenard duels are going to be epic going forward. That's what I'm saying. You go position by position in the NFC North, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous how much talent is in this conference, this division. Just absolutely ridiculous. Jay says, what will be Turner's role? If I had to guess, I would say, I'm going to say 600 snaps, and the role is going to be different all the time. That Van Ginkel will move back to a regular linebacker position at times, that he will fill in for Grenard sometimes. You think about what they did with somebody like Patrick Jones. Patrick Jones had a very dynamic role for them. Didn't drop back in coverage as much as you could see Dallas Turner doing. But even then, like last year, he dropped back in coverage a fair amount, and he's not going to get sack numbers, but if he's good at dropping back in coverage, it causes havoc for the quarterback. And those are little things that you might not see in a stat sheet, but he can do it, which just adds a whole new thing to what the quarterback has to factor for. Kit says, what's the best case scenario for Naylor? 40 catches, 650 yards, 6 touchdowns. That might be a little bit high for Naylor for even a best case scenario. 650 yards feels a little high. 40 catches is not crazy. Maybe something like 30 catches for 450 yards would be a good scenario. 6 touchdowns is also kind of high to repeat what he did last year. But yeah, maybe you're right. That just feels like a lot of yards per catch to get to 650. Maybe you're right. As absolute best case scenario, yeah. Earlier this year, I was looking back. I was trying to remember because I did 50 bold predictions, and I want to look at them at some point this week just to get a refresher this offseason. The kind of, hey, we're just thinking about football, but it's the middle of summer content. And I did have Jalen Nailor catching 44 passes for 567 yards or 76 yards as a bold prediction. Not sure that that's actually going to get there with Adam Thielen here. Reminder, FanDuel question of the day. Just want to make sure you guys answer that. percentage of targets you want to see to Jefferson week 1? Is it all of them? Or would you like to see it spread out quite a bit with the beginning of the season? Stephanie's still used to getting to hearing you say Thielen in the lineup. I know it's been a while. It has definitely been a while since I have talked about Adam. But it's funny though, because when this happens, it only happens every once in a while that somebody comes back after they leave. Tom Johnson came back. And how did he describe it? I think he described it as like going away for the summer and then coming back for the next year of school and seeing all your friends. It didn't feel much different at an Adam Thielen press conference than it did before. And, he knows everybody in this media because when you're here for that long, like you get to know everybody on a first name basis. And Thielen has been on the show. There's been, many feature articles. There's been many weekly press conferences. So it kind of was like, back to school, like an old friend, coming back. That's how it felt. Susan says Jefferson will get 27% of the targets. That is extremely specific, Susan. But I think that 1/3 would be pretty good if they throw 30 passes against Chicago, and 10 of them go to Justin Jefferson, 7 or 8 catches, and then you distribute the rest 2 or 3 to each guy. You're in good shape there. I think that's what they should be doing. Let's see. Crawl, most teams' goals are to eliminate Jefferson, so I think the catches will be low. Thielen and Hockenson are going to feast Jefferson 10% of the balls thrown his way. So you think that they're going to play it like they did last year, where they just have everybody running at Justin Jefferson. That's very possible. I think it's going to be more than that. I don't think that you can let Chicago do that again. Like you have to get them going right away. So I would go more than that. I would go more than just 10% of the targets. I would want him to get, because remember my old rule, if you're an old G listener to the podcast, you remember, and I'll bring it back this year, that if Jefferson doesn't have 10 targets, someone goes to prison. That's the rule, is that someone gets arrested on the coaching staff if Justin Jefferson doesn't get at least 10 targets, because throwing to Jefferson is just such a great play, such an efficient play, no matter what, even when he's doubled. Chris says, as far as Micah Parsons goes, he's a top 5 rusher. However, the NFC North has great offensive tackles, and he won't be playing his home games in the comfort of Jerry's world. Yeah. I mean, top 5 rushers, those guys, Bosa, Garrett, guys like that. And you have to remember with Parsons is that they do have good tackles. They'll rush him from just about anywhere. He's going to get his numbers. He's going to get his plays. He's going to make plays. He's going to be a good player for them. It's just, I think we all still know that regardless of how much money they gave him, how good he is and all that stuff, that if Jordan Love isn't great, that team will not get a whole lot farther, because they had a good defense last year. They had a top 6 defense last year, and they still end up getting eliminated in the playoffs because their offense just wasn't that great. Chris says the criticism of KOC's play calling is purely because we are sometimes ineffective on short yardage because of the weakness of the O-line in the past. KOC knew it was weak, so he went away from the run. Yeah, no play caller is ever flawless. And so if you're watching the game on Sunday, so I'm not misconstruing how I'm phrasing it. Like if you're watching the game on Sunday and it's 3rd and 1 and they throw a 14-yard incomplete pass, you are well within your rights to be like, Kev, what are we doing here? And there were a bunch of times last year where I did that. Or it was, why aren't you just running a delay handoff and punting the ball away there? Or why aren't you just winding clock? Or why can't you? Because the run game was working in the first half of the season. It was gaining about 5 yards a carry for Aaron Jones early. Why can't you, score in the red zone? Why can't you convert? There is, no one's ever going to be perfect when it comes to that. It's just bigger picture though. I mean, you watch some other games and some of the play calling and some of the offensive design from bad teams, and you go, oh yeah, Sam Darnold had it good last year with Kevin O'Connell. I think there should be a lot of confidence in the way that he can call plays for JJ McCarthy. But it still is a question of whether he will lean into the run if they get the opportunity to do that. Thank you, Bloody Soup. That sounds horrifying, but I appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to mention, if I didn't already, that coming up shortly on the show, Maggie Robinson, special contributor, formerly intern, but we changed her title, has a one-on-one conversation with Walt Anderson, and she asks him if the NFL is rigged. I'm not joking. She did. Walt Anderson he was the VP of officiating, and now, what is his role? I wrote it down. Rules analyst, Walt Anderson, like longtime NFL referee. So it's a really good conversation, and you'll want to hear his answer when she asks him if the NFL is rigged. So that's coming up shortly tonight on the show, but great questions and comments. So I'll keep answering your questions in a bit, if you guys promise to answer the FanDuel question of the day. Let's see. Jay says, this is the best O-line we have had in a decade on paper. I'm an OSU fan of Jackson as a swing player. He will destroy rushers this year. I think that he is going to, by the time they get to play someone like Pittsburgh, he's going to have to be ready to face great rushers. He is going to luck out a little bit because he doesn't have to face them early in the season. Where I think he's going to make the impact is in the screen game and in the run game. That's where I think he's going to make his biggest impact. For the pass protection, survive and advance. A lot of Dalton Reisner theory there, where it's like Dalton Reisner was never amazing, but the guy just found ways to survive a down. Just hang on for dear life against Jeffrey Simmons, give your quarterback some space to throw, and you'll be fine. But in the run in the screen game, that's where I think that he could be a serious impact player. And where he's got to learn is all the complicated rushes. That is hard for young players, but could be a difference maker right away. Two Dog Dad says, do you think that we'll take Pace Jr. off the field on third downs and swap in Turner, who's more of a pass rusher but can drop into coverage? Yes, 100%. 100%. I think that's very, very possible. I think Pace is an early down guy, first and second down, and then they'll try to get Dallas Turner, or even second down and long. Dallas Turner could be on the field. There's a lot of mixing and matching because you can move Andrew Van Ginkel to Ivan Pace's spot and still have him rush from that spot, as Ivan Pace did successfully all the time. This team is really good at rushing up the middle. There's so many options. So many different options. That's a great question from Maggie. Yeah. Mr. Mayor, not an intern means that Maggie is going to keep contributing. Last week, it was a mess there was all the breaking news and emergency podcasts, and they traded for Micah Parsons and all that stuff happened. And it was like Maggie and I kept scheduling our time to get together to record her segment. And then there just was something got in the way every single time. We were literally just about to dial it up and record our segment. And then Micah Parsons gets traded. And it was like, so what do we do now? And I'm like, I got to go live. But she'll be back on Tuesday. And then she's got this great interview. And Walt Anderson just gives you great insight into the real life of a referee. And he does directly address the issue of the games being rigged. So, but it's really good. I'll bring it to you shortly. But you guys are continuing to roll with the chat here. Crawl says, I want to see Scott running this coming Monday to run the clock up by 20. Yeah, well, if he's active, I think that Ty Chandler will probably be active, and it won't be Xavier Scott running the clock down at the end of the game. That is something, you would like to see, though. This is an area where I think KOC has to learn, and it's his fourth year as head coach. There's no more, hey, he's new at this, he's still figuring it out, or anything like that. They have kept teams in the game, and they did it a lot in 2022. Even like if you think about in a different world, like they let Denver and Cincinnati come back in games in 2023. Now it's better for them. Bo Nix might be your quarterback, so maybe it's not better. I don't know. But they could have made the playoffs in 2023 with Dobbs and Mullins if they just held on to a lead. And they, blew a lead. Was it Chicago? They blew, I think, 3 leads at the end of that season. And there was some mismanagement in there. And then last year they blew some leads, but they found a way to get one more pass from Sam Darnold, one more drive from Sam Darnold. You can't do that this year. You can't just blow leads left and right, because if you do that, Baltimore is not going to let you have it back. The Chargers aren't going to let you have it back. So that is something. That's what I mean about when we talk about anybody, when it's Dallas Turner or when it's KOC or whatever. It's like, how can we get specific about what we're talking about here? As far as overall play calling, absolutely fantastic results over the first 3 years. But this detail, like that is an important detail of, you've got all these one-score games that you've won in part because you've let a lot of teams hang around. Can't do that. Can't just ask your defense to do that. Can't make mistakes being too risky. Can't fail on 3rd down and 1 every time you get 3rd and 1, So there's things to be improved there. Bloody Soup says Vikings need to figure out the screen game. I don't know if it was our O-line or bad play calls. This has to get better. I tend to think O-line. I think O-line is so big for screens. And last year, I remember, with Ed Ingram in there were 3 or 4 screens that should have gone to the house that didn't, because he couldn't find his guy in space. I think Jackson could be really good there. I don't know about Fries. I guess we'll see. But Jackson, I have some confidence in. Deplorable Neanderthal says, do you think that coaches look at our safeties that double as quarterbacks filling out the cornerback? Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Corners, right? You mean cornerbacks? Like, do they look at the safeties as sort of also corners? Is that what you mean? A little bit, because someone like Josh Metellus can play both. Metellus can be a corner or a safety. And I'm curious, if Harrison Smith can't play, what they do with Josh Metellus. That's going to be something we talk about all week. If Harrison Smith can't come back this week, is it Josh Metellus still playing his role and someone like Jay Ward getting in there? Or is it going to be Metellus and then Jeff Okuda's on the field in more of a nickel package and Metellus plays the deep safety? Yeah. I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Jim, what position did number 9 play in hockey? I don't know. They see flashes of color in that game, added fearless pocket presence and savvy manipulation. Yeah, he's got a little bit of a hockey mentality. I don't know what position he played in hockey. JP says, I disagree with forcing targets to Jefferson. Yes, he needs to get targets. The Randy ratio didn't work. That was before your time. Oh, I know about the Randy ratio. Trust me. I know Mike Tyson is Randy ratio. Well, sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But I don't mean that they need to, hey, Jefferson hasn't gotten a catch, but we're winning by 17. Well, let's force him the football. I mean, your offense is at its best when it throws to Justin Jefferson. Quarterbacks are at their best when they throw to Jefferson. All the numbers are there. There's a reason for it. His contested catches are pretty unreal for his career. He's one of the best route runners, got some of the best hands. He's unstoppable. He's been unstoppable for this long. So if you're going away from him, it doesn't need to be a JJ ratio, but if you're going away from him for too long, like, that's not good for the health of your offense. That's where it all needs to start. Kral says, we need to be ready. My beloved JJ is going to make mistakes. There will be a few interceptions through the first few weeks, and it's okay. Sort of. Yes, that first part. Be ready. There's going to be some rookie moments. The first 3 weeks, though, this is what's so tough about JJ McCarthy and the situation he's being put in, which is not. Look, he's a first-round pick from Michigan. Okay, so this isn't some kid who just showed up here from Montana State. What are they? The Cougars? Are they the Bobcats? Whatever. Montana State. He didn't show up from Montana State and then just be like, oh, start again at Soldier Field. Like, he's been prepared for this. There was all this discussion about Arch Manning and where he went to high school and maybe he had easy high school competition. I saw a highlight, which it looked like my high school that had, 12 football players on it. And that wasn't JJ McCarthy playing for IMG. And he was playing against Ohio State and he was playing in the national championship. Like this, yeah, there's going to be rookie moments, but also the standard is extremely high and you need to win. You need to win right away because the schedule gets harder and harder. So I do think that you should have a high standard for McCarthy right away. David said, generally not a good idea to throw to receivers that aren't open unless their name is Justin Jefferson. I agree, unless their name is Justin Jefferson. Just the numbers are there. Jefferson doesn't have great separation numbers for his career. Doesn't matter. It's the best receiver in the league. If you have the best receiver in the league, you just throw it to him. If Nick Mullins can do it, then McCarthy could do it. I'm not saying every single time, but for him, it's just different rules. James, anything on Harrison Smith? Will he start game 1 against the Bears? I don't know. It's week to week, and we're just going to have to find out when we get to the injury report. I don't mean to sound like KOC, but it's true. We are just going to have to kind of wait till we get to the injury report to find out where he stands for this week. Because if he's practicing on Wednesday, then there's a pretty good chance. If he's not, then probably not. And then we're going to have to find out how they deal with that. Oak Dog says JJ will have a tough first start on the road in Chicago. Will be fun to see what happens. Yeah, it's not the easiest. It's not the easiest. Soldier Field. At least it's not a great team, but that place is intimidating. It definitely is. Dean says Arch Manning looked rough, though. I mean, he was playing against a great defense for his first game. Sometimes I just get a little bit like frustrated by how there's so much overreaction to everything. I didn't think it was a good game, and he wasn't getting rid of the football, but it's at Ohio State for his first game ever, and they came close. If he gets a couple of catches there, I didn't think that it was so bad that I would say, oh my gosh, he can't make it. Like, it's a long way away from him playing in the NFL. It's a long season. Like, we'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, who did it was funny because 3 of the guys who are projected to be potential first rounders, Manning, the guy from LSU, the guy from Clemson, they all had like the worst matchups to start a season. They don't get even preseason and just go out and play against Ohio State on the road. Good luck. And then there's other people who are playing FCS teams to start their seasons. I mean, Drew, look, I don't know college football that well at this moment. Just been laser focused, but is it Aller, the guy for Penn State? They're playing like Long Island Tech or something. Like what? That's just college football is weird like that. Let's see. Yeah, Addison and Jefferson are the best in the league at contested catches, or 2 of the best. Brian says JJ's accustomed to everything in the NFL, but playing a real game. That's right. That is how it feels. Let's see. Oak Dog says some people were reporting Manning had tears in his eyes after the loss. Is that really true? I don't know. I mean, does that make a difference? I'm sure that it would be an emotional thing to lose your first game like that on the last play. That's a little different than what Caleb Williams did, by the way. Like crying in football, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. I don't know how many times I've been in the locker room and, it's very clear that some guys have been emotional. It's a crazy emotional game. I mean, you're out there for 4 hours in college football, and the atmosphere is crazy and the pressure's crazy and all that sort of stuff. So, what I didn't like about Caleb Williams wasn't the fact that he cried. It was that he kind of like separated himself from his teammates, and they were losing in a game against Washington. He just went to the bench and sat alone, and the game wasn't even really over yet. There was still some chance, and it was like, what are you doing? Like, that's not where you need to be. But I mean, if there's no crying in baseball, but there sure is in football all the time. It's a very emotional game. So anyway, well, great conversation, everybody. But I did tease Maggie Robinson, formerly intern, now special contributor Maggie Robinson, asking a high level. And I was surprised. I think I was mostly kidding when I said this. I was like, you should ask him if the NFL is rigged. And she decided to do that anyway with Walt Anderson, who's the NFL officiating rules analyst and was the senior VP of officiating for, I think, 4 years, longtime NFL referee. So this is a really fun conversation between Maggie and Walt Anderson. And Walt takes you behind the scenes on kind of everything. Like he actually brings up the face mask last year and the rule changes. So if you're interested in that, the life of a referee, like Maggie got a lot out of this interview. So I'm going to bring you that next. That will be the end of the stream. And then tomorrow night, Arifa Hassan is supposedly going to be on the show tomorrow night. We're supposed to talk tomorrow. And then we go from there, folks. And then it's got a big lineup coming up. It's going to be great. Great first week. Wednesday, we'll have press conference sound on the show, and we'll hear from McCarthy, I think, and KOC and I mean, it's time. It is freaking time, and I can't wait for this week. So here is special contributor Maggie Robinson with rules analyst, former referee, former VP of refereeing, Walt Anderson. Enjoy, my friends.
Walt Anderson, welcome to Purple Insider. I'm so excited to have you here. For those of you who don't know, I'm Maggie Robinson. I'm Matthew Coller's intern for the summer, and I previously worked at the NFL on the broadcasting team doing production and operations, and one of my roles was sitting in the AMGC next to this man, Walt Anderson, most Sundays, assisting with rules analysts and liaising between the broadcasting department and the officiating department. So, Walt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Maggie. Good to see you again.
It's great to be here. I'd love to just jump right in. You spent 24 seasons as an NFL referee, 17 of those as head ref, and now you've shifted over to front office, previously senior vice president of officiating, and now NFL officiating and rules analyst. But I want to put you back in your on-field role. Okay. You spent so much time on the field. You refereed 17 playoff games, 2 Super Bowls. What was it like officiating in those big moments? Like, what was going through your head during a game?
Well, it was certainly always, an honor to have that opportunity to do so. And you spend so many years preparing to get to that point, really just like players and coaches. You want to be prepared so that you can really just go out and execute your job rather than kind of being consumed by the environment, so to speak, from that standpoint. So it was certainly a lot of fun. It was a big thrill. Witnessing the NFL game from the field is an experience that, unless you're playing or officiating, nobody else has. And, so it's really a unique opportunity. The TV does not do justice to the speed of the game when you're out there witnessing it in real time. So it was, I had a great run. I had a great time with it. I'm thankful for that opportunity. And football has always been a part of my life since I can remember. My dad was a football coach, and I'm still involved in the game. So football is still here.
I love that. And you mentioned the preparation that was key to keeping you grounded on the field. What does that preparation look like? I think the viewing public doesn't fully understand the amount of work it takes for you guys to get ready for a game. Can you walk me through your process of, say you have a game on a Sunday at 1 p.m.? Back it up. What does that look like in the days before? Are you watching film? How do you prepare for a game?
We do watch a lot of video, and certainly video, really just like for players and coaches, is your next best tool other than actual experience from that standpoint. But, since football in our business, we have one game a week. It's not like baseball where you're playing every day of the week from that standpoint. So you spend a lot of time with video. And so you really, from the time you get finished with the game on Sunday, really, when you get to the airport, most of us are flying back home, but most of us begin watching the video of the game on the airplane back home.
Wow.
With technology the way it is, we have the whole game available to us usually within about 30 minutes after the game is over. So we begin watching that process, and it's usually the broadcast feed that we watch first. And then other angles, coaching angles, other Hawkeye type angles, with us using Hawkeye now, come in either later that evening or early the next day. And so we end up finishing with that. So you'll end up with the time on the flight, plus normally about anywhere from 4 to 6 hours the next day, completely going through all the video of that particular game. So you want to really go through that. And then you'll end up, the office, of which I was a part of also for many years, is evaluating and grading the game as well. So they'll end up providing feedback to you, and you'll have some interaction then with your crew. You have crew meetings either on Monday or Tuesday to review that game with your crew. And we do that now virtually. from that standpoint. Before we had all this video technology, we had to do a lot of those types of calls just with conference calls, and it wasn't near as effective as whenever you can just share video. And so
Yeah.
you really want to try to put last week's game to bed or to rest, usually by Wednesday. And then immediately, whenever you do finish up with last week's games, you begin getting into the video study for your next week's opponents. So we spend a lot of time watching video. As an example, if next week I've got Minnesota and Green Bay, then I'm going to be spending time watching the last several weeks of games for both Minnesota and Green Bay to really just begin to get prepared for certain tendencies that you have to begin to expect from both of those teams, the types of formations they run, the types of hurry up schemes that they run, the kicking game, all those kinds of things. You try to get as familiar with both of the teams. Matchups, if you're going to have a really big or a dynamic type matchup between two players, you want to be aware of that. You may end up, as an example, with an all-pro receiver and an all-pro cornerback. That's probably going to be an intense matchup. So the officials that have to work the passing game, they want to spend a lot of time just watching, and particularly if maybe there's some previous footage of those two players and that matchup. So, we can really go deep back into the archives with stuff to just kind of begin getting familiar, with what teams are going to do. Now, the league office is also generating during the week training videos for all the game officials.
I remember you sending me those. I think you
Yes.
sent me the ones that went out to the clubs as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we send videos to the clubs, we send videos to the officials, and the officials watch the ones that we send to the clubs as well. So they want to know what messaging is being sent to coaches and players, because they often get questions about that. I would often get questioned, by the head coach, even a couple of hours before the game, hey, explain further the video that came out this week when it was talking about, as an example, maybe an emphasis on alignment of players, or maybe an emphasis of blindside blocks or something like that. So you have to watch all of those and be prepared. And then all of us have to get to the game site usually by around noon the day before your game. So most of us are traveling on Saturday. And so then when you get there, you check into the hotel. And then as a crew, we have a meeting for anywhere from 4 to 5 hours the day before the game to, again, just answer any questions that are lingering from last week's game. The referee will have spent a lot of time just going over the matchup for tomorrow's game, and he'll end up making various points to the crew from that standpoint. We have that meeting, and then typically we'll go out to dinner the night before the game together as a crew. And then you wake up on Sunday and usually have breakfast as a crew. And then we usually head to the game site, usually about 3 hours before the game.
I mean, this is a full-time process. I think something that a lot of, again, I keep saying the viewing public because that's who I'm generally talking to, but I don't think they understand the amount of work that goes in. And it's really easy to sometimes discredit a referee and say, like, how did he miss that? Is he blind? Like the usual Twitter responses. You mentioned at the beginning, the speed of play is so fast. I know you started off like in Little League all the way back at the beginning, but how do you get used to the speed of NFL play, and how sometimes you can see certain things, but TV cameras and all the different angles that we have are catching everything? How does that work for you when you see one thing, or maybe you miss something, but a TV camera catches a replay and then it's broadcast to the world?
Yeah, good question. And full disclosure, I've often asked myself, Maggie, how did you miss that? So I have been down that path before. But really, and this really applies in a lot of other businesses and professions and so forth. You actually, over the years, learn techniques to help process visual imagery. And, the game, we often say that you kind of learn to see the game in slow motion, but the game is in one speed, and that's real speed. But the brain is a wonderful organ. It has the ability to process visual imagery, recall that in your mind, and then confirm to you, yes, this is what I saw in detail, to determine, do I have a foul or do I not? Did the ball break the plane or not? Did the receiver toe tap at the sideline? Did he make that catch or did he not? And so when things happen really, really fast, the trick is just to learn, and over the years, train yourself to process things in a manner that you can recall them accurately. I remember my very first training camp back in 1996, that is, okay, for your audience there. But because it was at Arizona and it was up in Flagstaff, Arizona. At that time, the Oakland Raiders had come into camp. And I remember as a rookie, and I had worked, up to that point, 20 years of high school and some college football. And so, you think you've acquired the skills. You got selected to work in the National Football League. And so you think you've acquired the skills that, hey, you're ready for this and so forth. And I remember my very first camp and watching the players execute and the speed of the game. I remember coming away realizing that I thought I was prepared, but the speed of the game, and that was just training camp. That wasn't even an actual game. I knew then that I was going to have to even prepare more so than what I had, prepare that. So I even really got much more into the weeds, especially with visual processing. And I remember during those years, I was fortunate enough having a medical background to have some resources of people who were in that business, physicians who were in neurology and neuro-ophthalmology that I could lean on to say, hey, are there some tricks that you can help me with visual processing? And the fact is there are. I mean, there are things that professions do, fighter pilots, police work, military, that you can train yourself to see things in detail and then process those visually, recall them in your mind so you can confirm that, yes, that is actually what I saw, not what I think I saw. So there's some tricks to the trade, so to speak.
I gotta ask, what are they? Can you list a few of these tricks or techniques that you learned?
Well, a lot of it is learning through repetition. And again, having video to where you can see certain things and have them on film and be able to slow them down and really get the details so that in real time you can make notes of things, and then real quick you write down what are those details that I thought I saw, and then you go back to the video and then you test it. And if you see certain things that I didn't pick up on that, then what you really do is you back the video up in motion to maybe half speed or quarter speed, whatever detail or whatever speed you need to see that action. And then you study. The other trick, and this is what we often teach officials, the game is a game of motion. And very often people are looking for that magic snapshot, but you can't process it that way.
Yeah.
Everything is happening too fast. So what you actually learn to do is you see certain motions developing or evolving. Like as an example, Maggie, offensive holding, our most common foul that we call. Okay, because it occurs a lot because there's a lot of blocking and a lot of grabbing that goes on in a game. It doesn't just spontaneously, boom, there's holding from that standpoint. You end up having to have a player who reaches, he ends up grabbing, and then that grab has to have a certain effect on the defender, and that defender is then moving in a certain way. So all those elements of motion are what you really learn to see. And so it's kind of like a bell curve. You end up seeing that motion evolving, and it either gets to that point where it reaches the threshold of a foul or it dissipates and you move on to other motion. I know that's into the weeds on things, whatever, but you asked the question, so
I'm curious.
I answered it.
I remember also you've been doing this for so many years, and when we were sitting in AMGC, you would know calls right off the bat. And I'm talking, for the people who don't know, AMGC is the Art McNally Game Day Control, which is the officiating hub in the NFL in New York City, where all the replay assist is occurring. You're sitting up there. All of our officiating crew, off-field crew, is up there. And there's screens with every game. And then there's monitors with, I don't know, how many cameras are on each.
It varies. The 1 o'clock windows usually have anywhere from 10 to 11. And by the time we got into Sunday night, Maggie, I mean, we were up to into the 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have cameras monitoring every single game, watching every angle of everything. But you were always sitting next to me, identifying off the bat, oh, that's this call, immediately. Before maybe even we're seeing it live on TV, you were there. You're reffing on the field and you're making these split-second decisions, and say maybe you make a mistake. At any given time, half the stadium doesn't like you, and you have millions of people watching the game, this is such a pressurized environment. So how are you coaching up people, and how did you personally handle that stress of, oh, I know I just messed up. What do I do? How do I move on? I have another 90 minutes to get through.
Yeah, again, I mean, and they actually have professional people that can kind of help you with this if you need it. But you really have to just compartmentalize the play.
Mm,
Just exactly like players, do is you try to execute the play. You try to have a process. And everybody really in today's world works on that process is you train through repetition to do certain things, to have certain visual transitions, keys, whatever that might be. And you try to execute those on every play. And you hope you do it right on every play. But whether you do it right or whether you do it wrong, once the play's over, there's nothing you can do about it.
yeah.
And so there will be opportunities and time to learn from those opportunities, but it's not right now. You have to then get prepared immediately for the next play and get back into that process. And so part of our training is developing the discipline to get immediately back into that next phase. Through the years, I narrow everything down to three things: pre-snap routine, keys, and focus. That's the thing on every play you're trying to do. You have certain things on every play. You prepare mentally very different for a 3rd and 1 play than you do for a 3rd and 8 play.
Mm-hmm.
Because the game situation is different, and players do the same thing. So just like Hall of Fame quarterbacks, when you throw a pick six, you can't dwell on that pick six,
Mm-hmm.
because if you do, you're going to throw another pick six. You just have to let it go, and it's not easy, but that's what you have to do. And then you move on to the next play. And then when it's all said and done, as I mentioned, when you get back on that airplane, you start studying. Okay, I need to start then evaluating the game for my benefit. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And the things I did wrong, how can I correct them?
Yeah, I have to ask this, and I'm asking this on behalf of the people on Twitter and on Instagram. People think the game is rigged. They think officials are being paid off, and you'll see all this online. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen the comments. What do you have to say to that?
I mean, it's just, first of all, I don't do social media. So, and I know even my family will often kid me about that, because I always tell them I don't tweet and I have no friends, So, you just don't get into that. It's just a job. And that may sound like you're removed from the game, but that's really just our role from that standpoint. So, you're human, you're going to make mistakes. But a lot of time, as we've talked about, a lot of time is spent just trying to minimize those mistakes as much as is humanly possible. So the conspiracy stuff, I mean, you hear about it, it's like, oh, whatever. And then, we don't spend any time dwelling on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Once again, this is a healthy mindset of just like, it's false, so not even going to engage, not worth your time or energy.
I mean, this is not a tennis match where you got one player.
Yeah.
I mean, the game has got so many people around it, and it's so complex and whatever. To rig the game people are just not thinking of the hypothetical possibilities or what it would take to do. I mean, it's just, it's not practical from that standpoint.
Yeah.
That's what keeps everybody's attention, those kinds of things. So.
It does. People love to throw that around. I'd like to think of you again in this on-field role. You got the earpiece in. Say you're the on-field official. Can you walk me through the review process, like step by step? Who are you hearing in your ear? When do you know to go to the tablet? How are you making decisions? Why does it take so long? How does this process work?
Well, some of that, the audience might be interested. The instant replay has evolved through the years. And for most of my career, I was the final decision maker as the referee on the field, because we would go over to the hood is what it was called, the little hood that had the NFL shield, and from that standpoint, now they have tablets, but also the decisions now are made, in New York at a central location. But most years that we've had replay, the decision was made on the field. So again, you have to realize out on the football field, the 7 officials have specific areas of responsibility. And as the head referee, I was mostly watching the blocking in the pocket and action in and around the quarterback. My job was, quote, to protect the quarterback. not to stand in front of him and take the hit, but if somebody did hit him illegally, I had to throw the flag on the defender. So you're watching the game from that perspective. You'd often hear the roar of the crowd because there was a long pass and it was either intercepted or caught. So the crowd roared, but you have no clue back here with the quarterback what just happened. You just heard something, whatever. Then all of a sudden, here comes a challenge flag, from say a coach, and you go over to the coach and he says, "Well, Walt, they didn't catch that ball. I'm challenging that." So now you go over to the monitor and you haven't seen anything of that play. And so when you go over to the monitor, you put the headset on, and that's the very first thing you end up asking is the people on the other end, your replay official. At that time, we were talking with New York as well, is, okay, what are we looking at? And so they kind of describe to you, hey, we're going to look at the catch in the back of the end zone. We got to look to see if he got both feet down. So then you begin looking at that. And again, it's all about angles, because you can look at one angle and you can even put them side by side from that standpoint to be able to look at them. But you're just looking through the detail to be sure all the aspects. And if it is a catch, that the catch process, he gets possession 2 feet down and then, holds it long enough, or if he goes to the ground, holds it when he hits the ground. So you're just looking at all the rule aspects of a particular play to be sure it satisfies what the rule is. And then you always start, what was the ruling on the field? So if they ruled it as a catch, that he got 2 feet in, that evidence has got to be clear and obvious that he didn't get 2 feet in. And so that's what you're looking for. And, a lot of them, at times in some games, the majority of them, it's like, it's just not enough there. We can't change the ruling on the field. Or if it is, then you say, okay, no, I'm going to reverse that. And so as a head referee, you right away start thinking about, how am I going to announce this? Because that in about 15 seconds, you're going to be on national TV, describing to people, what it is that you're about to see. So,
that was my next question. Are you formulating, is there a specific way that you're supposed to announce things, or is it just as efficient and as concise as possible? Let me get this out.
It's evolved into the latter, Maggie.
Okay.
When we started replay years ago, as a matter of fact, I do remember this play because it was in Pittsburgh, and it was a play in the end zone relative to a catch, no catch for a touchdown. And this was really in the early years of replay, and it became known as Walt's replay tease, because I don't know that I intentionally did it, but it was like you're trying to describe the whole thing, which was really at that time what we thought we wanted to do. But as it turned out, audience doesn't need that much information. And so I ended up saying, after review, the receiver gained possession of the ball, and then all of the Pittsburgh fans, yay! However, he did not maintain control of the ball when he hit the ground. So the pass is incomplete. It's not a touchdown. Boo! So I sort of somewhat set them up, I guess, not intentionally, but in hindsight, it's like, no. And so we've evolved into, after review, it's incomplete. You just kind of get to the facts from that standpoint, because, it was, you go from highs in the stadium to lows and boos in the stadium.
You've talked about officiating replay assists has kind of transformed over the years, and now we're stepping into a new change in the 2025 season. Can you explain that and what that's going to look like and how it's different?
Yeah, this will be the 5th year of replay assist. And the way that evolved a number of years ago is technology being what it is, with camera angles and high frame rates and the detail that the audience over the years got used to seeing. Certain things would happen on the field and a mistake would be made, not intentionally, but just a mistake would be made. And the whole world is looking at, just like you said a while ago, how could you miss that?
Yeah.
It's like, his foot's on the line, whatever. And the whole world would know that. Isn't there a easy way that we could get that information to the officials and tell them, no, it's not a catch, and just make it and move on?
Mm-hmm.
Don't spend 2 minutes on a review when we could spend 10 seconds. And just with technology, officials have those earpieces. We're talking to them, and all the time. And so that's how it evolved. And we started with the very simple things, the things with lines and the ground. Did the ball hit the ground before it got the receiver? Hey, guys, it's incomplete, and just make the announcement. But eventually we got to, even with certain fouls that are called, Most fouls have a lot of subjective components to them. There's
Okay.
judgment, and you have to leave those on the field.
Mm.
But certain fouls have very objective elements to them that we could end up telling the official, no, like intentional grounding. If you're out of the pocket and the ball gets to the line of scrimmage, it either lands beyond the line of scrimmage or it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's black and white, from that standpoint. And so you could tell the referee, hey, the ball got to the line of scrimmage. That's not a foul. Let's pick that flag up from that standpoint. So what we added this year, and every year over the last 4, the competition committee has said, hey, we feel comfortable about adding these items, and let's get good then at administering those, and then we'll look at if there are other items. So last year, you'll recall, like if a roughing the passer, if the referee called a hit to the head, but we had video evidence that he hit him in the shoulder, chest, or the shoulder, then we could tell the referee pick that up.
Yeah.
The play where you call a late hit out of bounds, but in fact, the defender hit the quarterback at the sideline before he stepped out of bounds, the Green Bay play.
I was going to say, I remember that well. Yeah.
Remember that? Okay.
Yes.
So that we added last year. That went very, very well. We picked up in the 24 season some originally called fouls that were just not fouls because the objective criteria just were not met. So this year we're adding other hits to the head of other defenseless players, receivers downfield, a quarterback who's sliding. So if the receiver goes downfield, goes up, has the ball, boom, there's this big collision, and the back judge feels, oh, he got him in the head, so he throws his flag, but we can see hit him in the shoulder. Then we can tell the back judge, we're going to pick that flag up. Quarterback slides, happens a lot, and he can't ever get hit in the head if he slides and gives himself up. So defender goes over the quarterback really, really fast. Here comes a flag, for a hit to the head, but we can see that head might have hit the ground when he went to the ground, but the defender didn't hit him, so we can pick that up from that standpoint. A horse collar, you have to grab the collar of the nameplate. So if you grab the number and pull the guy down, we can tell the officials we can pick that flag up.
And is this made possible by the fact that you have more slow motion cameras that are able to capture all these different angles in
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's not only the speed of the cameras, but the fact that there are more cameras. We've added this year, every stadium now has 12 permanently mounted, what we call boundary cameras.
Yes. In the
each goal line, each end line, and each sideline from both sides of the field and from each end of the field. So that's 12 extra cameras from those angles that will always be there that we'll be able to use. And so it's both the numbers of cameras, because that gives you more angles. And then so many of the cameras now have really high frame rates.
Sure.
And so when you get those high frame rates, rather than 60 frames a second, which at the speed of the game, a lot of things just look blurry. You just can't tell. But when you get a 240 frames a second camera, I mean, every click, of that motion is very, very clear and very, very detailed. So
I have to ask you then, if you have someone on the field who's making one of those quote subjective calls, but you're seeing something different on all of these camera angles, but it's not one of those plays that you're allowed to assist on, how are you handling a situation like that?
You often acknowledge that we missed that one because the rules just do not allow you to try to fix everything. One of the things that the audience often ask us is whatever, well, why can't you review everything? My response is, well, why can't you sit for 10 hours and watch the game? And it's because it would just drag the game out. The reality is you want the game played by humans, coached by humans, and you want it officiated by humans. Now, technology has allowed us to use that technology to enhance that experience and correct certain things, but we're just not to the point where we want to stop and review everything. One of the areas we added this face mask is another one that if the officials call a face mask on the field, but I end up grabbing the collar and pulling. And very often I turn the head, turn the body, and it looks like a foul, but it's not because it didn't grab the face mask from that standpoint. We had two very high profile games last year. One involved Minnesota.
I was going to ask you about it, but you brought it up.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So one involved in the Minnesota LA game where it was a clear and obvious foul for a face mask that the official from his angle just did not see. He missed it from that standpoint. And so a foul should have been called. When we looked, as soon as the season was over, we began reviewing with the competition committee, okay, what areas for next year might the committee want to consider adding? So we immediately got into the face mask. And so then the big question is, do you let replay add penalties, or do you only let replay pick penalties up that have previously been thrown by the official? And when you start looking into it, it's really easy to take the Minnesota LA play, and everybody, 100% of people will agree, hey, that's a foul. Sure would have been nice to be able to fix that. Okay. So that's one of 50,000+ plays in a season. The other reality is we then start taking a look at all those other plays, and we show those. I could show them to you, showed them to the committee. Okay, is there anything else about this play we need to stop the game and review? Well, no, nothing else happened. I can see, so that's okay. Well, what about this angle from camera 32? And I can see over on the sideline after that wide receiver and the cornerback were engaging, he reaches up and grabs his face mask. Does he grab it and pull it, which would make it a foul? Does he grab it and release it, which it would not be a foul? And that's not something, nobody else has seen that.
Yeah.
So do you stop every play of every game and review everything? Because who then decides and picks and choose, well, let's fix the Minnesota play, but no, we don't need to fix, the Buffalo play or the Dallas play or whatever. Who makes those decisions from that standpoint? And so after all of the discussions, all of the stakeholders, all the decision makers is, hey, let's fix the ones that are incorrect, that if the official calls in and it's not right, we'll pick it up. But we're not going to go down that path of having replay create penalties, because what would it do to the game? It wouldn't make the game more consistent. It would make it more inconsistent.
Yeah.
Because it's either going to drag it out, or you're going to review some things, not review others. And that will only enhance the conspiracy theory, Maggie, not make it go away. So,
is another way that you're trying to cut down on decision-making time this Hawkeye technology with line to gain? That's a question I have, because obviously you want the game refereed by real people doing the thing. But now here we are with this goal line technology, and now we're going to the video board every line to gain moment where we're checking it. What are you seeing this do from an officiating standpoint?
It'll reduce the amount of time it takes us to do a measurement, because, the officials will still spot the ball. There's not some chip in the football that's saying, hey, put it at the 48.5. That doesn't exist. There's no laser being used for that. The officials will spot the ball. The cameras will take an instant picture, and software will triangulate the position of that ball within a quarter of an inch, which is more accurate than the humans on the sideline or putting those stakes down. Whatever. Yep. But the average time for us to bring chains out and then get chains back and get them reset and so forth was well over a minute. Most of the time it was around a minute and a half. Last week when we had that virtual measurement in the Hall of Fame game, which was time is live, that took 17 seconds.
Wow, I didn't know that.
No. So, there's still some things to work out from a technology standpoint with, behind the scenes software processing and then sending it to the cameras, be sure all those links work, to the truck and so forth. So, we're going to be practicing here during the preseason with it to try to get it down. But we tested it all last season.
Yep.
In real time, and our average time was right at a little less than 30 seconds. So that's almost a minute of the game that's really wasted time. It might create some drama from that standpoint, but there are smart people around with graphics, as you well know, they'll end up creating some graphic that'll end up making the visual drama just replace the actual physical drama of watching an umpire grab a pole, stretch it, whatever. But that's what we were used to for decades.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people said, well, it's going to take out the drama. And yeah, it might. But my guess is, as long as I've been around this game, something else will replace that drama to create other drama.
Yeah.
I'm confident that's going to end up happening.
That makes sense. How does the selection process work for refs? How are you picking new people? How are you bringing them up?
It's like with players, we're scouting officials, we're spending time with them, and we'll end up selecting them. And we have what you might call a draft, but just nobody watches it. So,
I'd love to hear more. What do you mean? What does it look like?
well, it's we have a scouting department, that has people that go out and watch, not just in person, but on video, the officials that are working in the college area that we are evaluating. Do they have what it takes to be an NFL official, and to make that grade? And so this year, I think it's six new ones that we hired, this year out of the college ranks.
Yeah.
And so, it wasn't that we just, on April the 15th or whatever day it was, we says, hey, let's get 6 officials. Let's just take those 6. A lot of years have been spent watching those 6 officials work and separating their performance from others and elevating them, if you will, on their draft board.
Yeah.
Just like the teams do, from the standpoint, okay, if we get the number 1 pick, this is who we're taking. God. And then in round 2, based on who's available, here's our selections for that. It's the same thing. If we need 6 officials, these are the 6 we need to take. If this year we only need 1, who would that 1 person be? If we need, as I had a couple of years, if we need 12, who are those 12 going to be? So it's very, very similar, to what clubs do with the draft process. But when it comes time for us to notify them, we just simply call them on the phone and tell them, we would, invite them to the end of the NFL, but we don't send a camera crew out there.
We should. This is untapped potential. We need to be doing the NFL draft on ESPN, but it's the referee edition.
Yeah. I think you're beyond, Maggie, what people are interested in. So again, no, we'll just let the officials be anonymous like they want to be, which we do. We want anonymity is a good trait for officiating. So we're content with staying in the background.
I respect that. Okay, I know we're almost at time here, but I have to ask you, what was it like walking off the field for your final game? It was in 2019, the NFC divisional game, Vikings at the 49ers. What was going through your head? Did you know that was your last game?
I did.
Okay.
I knew that was my last, was going to be my last game. Not a lot of other people knew that. I had some talks with the league about, what they wanted me to do sort of in my next role from that standpoint. But knowing that you needed to just keep certain things, you need to focus on the job, and nobody else needed to know, that there were other things going down the road. And again, fortunately for me, I had been doing it so long and was so used to it being just a job. You go out there for that day and you end up doing that. And so I approached it the very same way, because the one thing I did know is that if I don't stay true to that process, if I don't approach it that same way, I don't want to be remembered in a negative way my last game. You have much more of a likelihood of making a mistake. And normally it's the negative things from an officiating standpoint that they remember. Nobody remembers all our good calls. They only want to focus on the bad calls from that standpoint. So, in hindsight, it was like, nope, just go out and do your job. And there will be plenty of time in the future to then sit and relax and reflect, if you want to do so, reflect upon that last game from that standpoint.
Well, Walt Anderson, thank you so much for your time. This was phenomenal. And hopefully the audience got a few of their questions answered, but this was great. And thank you for speaking with me.
You bet, Maggie. And they'll let you know as they have more questions. And at some point, maybe we can do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you.